Hi, everyone. We're going to get started with NERDA, then we're going to go over to the select board. But before we get into all of that, we'll go through the remote script that allows us to have this meeting online. So first, I'd like to confirm all the members that are here. We'll start with board members by roll call. When I call your name, please let me know that you're present. Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Don Holgate.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
And I'm here. Christy just notified me that she's going to be a couple minutes late. Now I'm going to call on all staff members, just as I see you here in the boxes. David Gray.
Here, good evening.
Ken Bogrant.
Present.
Libby Gibson.
Present.
Tucker Holland.
Here.
Erica Mooney.
Present.
Holly Backus.
Present.
Dean McCarthy.
Present.
Roberto Santamaria.
Present.
Bill Pittman.
Present.
Andrew Voice.
Here.
Janet Schulte.
Here.
Oh, everybody's jumping around now. Kamal McCarthy.
Here.
Graham Durovich.
Here.
And I see Paul O'Leary.
Here.
I think I got everyone there. And then we have Rich Gillis, who's here for the HTC appeal. Rich, can you hear me? Just say that you're here.
Here. Sorry about that.
Thank you. And then George Arison, you're also here, I believe, for the strategic plan.
Good evening, everyone.
Hey there. And then there's Jeff Carlson. And Greg Tibnan.
Present.
Thank you. And Karen McGonigal, sorry. I'm missing everybody.
Here.
Okay, I think that's everyone. So now we'll get into this part. This open meeting of the select board is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment This meeting, the select board is convening by video conference via Zoom as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this board are also available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Let's see. If everyone could, if you're not speaking, non-board members, if you're speaking, turn off your video and your mute, please. That's always helpful. People registering to be attendee must use their names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode, then can click the raise hand button if they wish to speak. Okay, that's the remote script. Now we're going to get into the Nantucket Regional Transit Authority. So I'd like to call that the NERDA to order for October 13th. Is there any public comment that's not on the agenda? Here, okay. And approval of minutes for the September 8th, 2021 meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. By roll call, Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. That passes 4-0. And then we have approval of a contract award for the supply and delivery of diesel fuel. Paul is going to take us through that.
Yes, we received one bid for the supply and delivery of diesel fuel. It was submitted by Sun Island Fuel, and their pricing for period for 21-22 is $1 above the Journal of Commerce rate, $1.10 per gallon for the following year, and $1.20 per gallon for the third year of the contract. And I would recommend approval to Sun Island Fuel.
Thank you.
Oh, how does that compare to this year and last year?
In 20, it was 79 cents, and in 21 it was 82 cents. Above the Journal of Commerce rate.
Any other comments or questions? The board?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. That passes 4-0. Thank you, Paula. I don't know if there's any other business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. Thank you. The NERDA is over. We can move over to select board meetings. I'd like to call the October 13th select board meeting to order. No changes to the agenda that I know of. We can move to announcements.
Thank you. We have the couple of usual announcements that we've had for a few weeks now. The usual one, the select board meeting is being video and audio recorded, as we know. And the COVID vaccine clinic has now moved to the 131 Pleasant Street trailer on Sundays from 12 noon to 3 p.m. And the full schedule can be found on the town website.
Thank you, Libby. Is there any opening comments from select board members? Okay, seeing none. We move into the follow-up comments from a prior select board meeting. This is a follow-up from October 6th regarding public comment on the Sconset Bluff Erosion Control Project. Libby's going to respond.
So what we've been trying to do here is when there are very specific public comments that people are asking specific questions of us that are requested to be answered, we try to get to them in a subsequent meeting. So I rewatched the video last week of the public comments made by Ms. Perry, and I have answers subject to board supplementation, I guess I would say. First question was, the select board has gone into agreement behind closed doors of the executive session with SBPF to expand the geotubes. The select board has not met an executive session with SBPF. The board does intend to file a new joint notice of intent with SBPF for a modified project. Those modifications have not been fully developed. However, they will most likely track to a memo submitted by a work group composed of members of the select board, SBPF, Concom, town staff, and others, dated October 15, 2020. And as we discussed during the meeting last week, the company referenced in the statement, which had also to do with the engineering company not recommending expansion of the geotubes. That statement was explained a couple of times during the presentation last week, that long-term options for Baxter Road, expanding the project was not necessarily a long-term recommended adaptive alternative, because while it did meet effectiveness criteria, it was clear that it would not likely meet other criteria. Second question was, will those executive session minutes now be made available to the public? And as I mentioned, the select board did not meet in executive session with SBPF. Executive session minutes involving threatened, potential, or active litigation are not public until the litigation has been settled or resolved, which has not happened in this case. Third question was, will that agreement address such things as, I'm paraphrasing what the president of SBPF has said, that they'll basically walk away from the projects and not honor previous contracts that they signed? Has something like that been addressed? The town has not reached any kind of a formal agreement with SBPF as to what they or the town will or will not do. And I think we all hope an agreement can be made whereby SBPF continues to maintain the existing project. And the last question, I believe, was, is the select board still denying independent counsel for the Concom with regards to the geotube projects and SBPF and the select board? The select board has not denied independent counsel. Rather, the Concom, through its administrator, has been requested to provide some additional information as to need, cost, and intended defense strategy, likelihood of success, proposed scope, who it would seek to retain. That information to that response has been received, and it is currently under review.
Thank you, Libby. I think this is a nice agenda item that we added this year of the follow-up. So we're going to try to keep doing that. Okay, is there any public comment that is not on the agenda? Okay, we have one hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for following up on my questions from last week. I really appreciate it. May I ask another question through you, just for a clarification?
You can ask, but we'll have to follow up next week. It's public comment. We don't discuss anything, but please go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Is there any conflict with the select board and the Conservation Commission and being in partnership with SBPF? Has that been just kind of looked into, maybe with like state ethics or anything like that? Particularly pertaining to independent counsel, because I understand that town council is to represent the select board, but where the select board is in partnership with SBPF, it's kind of a little bit of an awkward spot to be in. So I didn't know if anybody's checked with state ethics to see if that is something to explore. It would be kind of a bummer if it became an issue. So that was just kind of a curiosity question on my part. So I appreciate you guys following up on that.
Thank you. Is there any public comment tonight that's not on the agenda? Okay, we're going to move to the COVID-19 update, Public Health Department.
So as we move forward in the situation right now, last BioBot outbreak that we had, or report that we had, showed about 5 cases. So it's a jump of viral load in our sewer system. We did see a few cases pop out last week. What we are also seeing is a dynamic population, kind of because of the weddings. So in a weekend like this one, where we had a long weekend and the samples being taken after the long weekend on Tuesday, we won't get our report until around Friday, but it probably won't show those extra people that we had over the weekend. So that's when you hear a lot of conversations about the BioBot sewer report and how it is possible that it can be inaccurate. It is true that it can be inaccurate, but however, we take our samples on Monday, which is mostly our year-round population when it comes into the fall. So we're not necessarily taking our samples of the dynamic population people that we see. So we are actually seeing, when it says 5 cases per day, we are actually seeing those 5 cases per day. It has been very accurate, and it has helped inform our policy. The Board of Health meeting is next Thursday, the 21st, and what we will be discussing the emergency orders as we move along, and where we are with the state. The CDC did move us down into a moderate transmission last week, and we're hoping to stay there tomorrow, but we'll see. They report every Thursday or Friday, so every week. And based on our increase in cases, we may be moved back into high transmission, but moderate transmission is still pretty decent. That still maintains us within the mask advisory category for the CDC. Then as far as schools go, we are still waiting on the FDA for approval of the Pfizer vaccine for people ages 5 to 12. We should be hearing that. We keep hearing, within the next few days, but we're still adjusting in a hurry up and wait mode. The good news is the Merck antiviral pill has been approved, and it is moving forward, and that is very effective in keeping people out of the hospital. However, you have to be diagnosed before you show severe symptoms. So you have to make sure you monitor symptoms. If you start showing any sort of COVID symptoms, lack of smell, high fever, things like that, make sure you get yourself tested, because that Molnupiravir, I think is what it's called. I don't name them. We don't understand why they have to come up with the most ridiculous names, but that's just what they are. But once we went with that antiviral is just what I'm going to call it, pill, you have to get it early. So just like with the flu, with the anti-flu pill, I forgot what that one's called too. You have to get it within the first few days of diagnosis of symptom onset, because once you get to the severe symptoms, it won't do anything for you. So just keep monitoring, and hopefully we can move forward from there. And we're looking forward to getting back to, I wouldn't say normal, because I don't think we're ever getting back to normal as far as COVID goes, but we'll be getting back to living normal lives, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Roberto. Any questions? Comments? Matt?
Yeah, so Roberto, you're saying the five a day is tracking to 5 residents a day. And because you're checking to see, is it the weddings that are here and then left? So you're seeing on-island transmission at that level.
We are at around a 3% right now, 3% positivity rate for the past 7 days. It did go down. It is down this week, so that's really good. But last week we did see that slow spike, and then now we're back down.
Right. Yeah, and I just wanted to highlight that, because some people have said, oh, really? It's not here. It's just the wedding people, and then they leave. But, I think it's important to tell people it is us, and still be careful.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. And then the other point I was going to make, I think it was Franklin today as applied. They're the first school that had over 80% vaccinated. So they're applying to drop their masks.
It's Hopkinton High School.
Hopkinton. There you go. Thank you.
Mhm.
And it's interesting, because I think, the way I'm sort of wired, I think if we had a goal to, people are just so tired of the masks. If we had a goal and we knew I didn't know that was even possible. I think if we had a goal, people would get vaccinated, get the masks off. Everyone go and get vaccinated. Let's get to 80-85%, let's have a normal winter, so that's sort of that was my thinking when I read it.
Yeah, hopefully we reach that level with our high school, and the school committee can vote. The school committee actually has to do that vote. We don't do it on their behalf.
Melissa?
Thanks. I guess a follow-up to Matt's comment about Hopkinton. Roberta, do we know what the vaccination rate of the high school is?
We do, but I don't have the number in front of me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious. It's a statistic I haven't focused on before. So thank you.
Christine, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just wondering, with holidays like Halloween coming up, I know that we'll have events on island. Is there any other kind of precautions or things that the town is putting out as we come up to the holiday season?
We're probably just going to maintain the regular advisories from last year, but I don't foresee us putting out any sorts of orders like we did before. People know what they have to do at this point. So the good news is, where we are this, for example, Thanksgiving, where we are this Thanksgiving versus where we were last Thanksgiving, we have a much larger population vaccinated now, as in we have 100% more people vaccinated now than we did before. So it's a different, we're playing it with a different game now.
Thank you, Roberto. Matt?
Yeah, just to address Melissa's question, the article said that at least 80% of the staff and school have been vaccinated. And that's the threshold, is 80% of the staff and school.
Yeah, I think she was asking about what's our rate at our school currently. And Roberto didn't have that in front of him.
Yeah, I gotta see if I can find it now.
Can we go to Mary Longacre? Oh, sorry, Melissa.
No, please go to Mary. That's fine.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Thank you, Jason. 2 questions. One, I don't know if Roberta will be able to answer, but I hope so. Do we have any information on the availability of the Merck antiviral medicine? I know it's been approved, but how long do you think it will take to get through the supply chain and actually onto the island? And then the second question is, if you would tell us what the town's policy is now about posting the number of positive cases. the posts have gotten erratic and far between, and I'd like to know what to expect in the future. Thank you.
Yes, no, absolutely. So to answer the first question, we have an unfair advantage in that our hospital is a Mass General Brigham. So they are lumped in with the larger logistics there. So we will be getting doses before most of the other hospitals in the state of Massachusetts because we're part of that larger group. The estimates from Merck that they have been releasing out is that we should be receiving that Mirapirnavir. I'm surprised I can still pronounce it. We should be getting that by the end of December. So that's more or less the timeline there. As far as the posting of the cases, we've been trying to keep it at Fridays, posting it weekly on Fridays. But over the last 2 weeks, we've had a few hiccups with data, with the way we've been receiving our data through the multiple testing groups. So on some days it was coming out on one week, it came out, I think, on Thursday because we weren't going to have somebody, the person who posts it wasn't here on Friday. We had a couple of people on vacation the day it gets posted. So sometimes it showed up that following Saturday. So we do understand that it did come out poorly those few weeks, but we are trying to stick with Fridays.
Thank you, Roberto. Melissa?
Thanks. I just wanted to, I guess, maybe wax a little philosophical with you for a second, Roberto, if you don't mind. With 5 cases per day, that feels, in my estimation, but I'm not a scientist and I'm not on the public health front, manageable. So as we sort of move forward as a community learning to live with COVID, what are some of the indicators that we can start to take greater comfort in? And what are you considering about your mask advisory versus mask mandate? I think, it's hard for us lay people to know where this thinking, where we're heading as a community as we learn to live with COVID as another disease that's going to just be a part of our lexicon for a long time.
Absolutely. What we're going to be, as we move forward, we have to learn to live with COVID. And COVID is going to be one of those situations, one of those illnesses that we're going to hear about every year, just like with flu, just like with other illnesses. Whooping cough is still an issue in the United States, in certain parts of the United States, even though we've had a vaccine fully approved, fully tested, fully checked for decades. We still see it in the US because of various reasons. So we are going to be seeing pocket and localized outbreaks because it's going to be endemic to certain parts of the US. In our case here, if you remember where we were in March or April of 2020, where one case was freaking people out, and we had one case show up in a month, and it felt a lot more dangerous. Now we understand the virus a lot more now. We understand how to treat it. We understand how to prevent it, how to work on treatments and illness and the symptoms. So as we move forward, you'll hear the severity go down. And yes, there are going to be some severe illnesses, just like the flu. There are going to be deaths, just like the flu, across the United States. Where we are now is that we have a much less susceptible population, which was where we were last year. Where we were this time last year, we didn't have the vaccine available. And one person or 5 people showing up with positive cases, everyone that was around them was susceptible to this illness. Now that Nantucket has a vaccination rate of approximately 70%, and the state of Massachusetts is at around 70-75% now vaccinated people, what we're going to see is that really only a couple people around them are susceptible if somebody comes back positive. And what we've also seen is that even though there are breakthrough cases with the variants and Delta variants and things like that, it's much less contagious. So it is still much more contagious than the wild type. So COVID, when it first came out, COVID-19 wild, which is the original strain that we saw in February of 2020, had a R number of approximately 2.4 to about 3.2 or so. The Delta variant has an R of about 8, which puts it as contagious as chickenpox. But even through breakthrough cases, it brings that down by about 70%, 75%. So we are still seeing an R of around 2, even in breakthrough cases, which is great. So it's, for lack of a better word, because by no means is it controllable, but for lack of a better word, it's a controllable number. And it's a number we can live with. And it's really the hardest part about the discussion of public health in general. When you talk about global health and you talk about health equity and global health equity, I think my professor, John Simon, said it the best way, where on one hand, you have one population and on another hand, you have a different population, but you only have the knowledge and funding to save one of them. And that's unfortunately where we are in the world. And the United States is incredibly privileged to be able to have the amount of doses and the treatments that we do have. And we can start moving forward to just looking at it as an endemic illness.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Roberto. Thank you, Jason.
Anything else COVID related or for Roberto? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no new business that I know of. I have an approval of the minutes for October 6th and approval of the treasury warrants for October 13th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. Those pass unanimously. Moving on to select board reports, comments. We have the strategic plan implementation update. So Libby's going to lead us through this, and then we're going to go through all the sections and goals. We have all the town staff here to help us answer any questions, walk through. What I thought would be best is if the select board members, we can ask questions as we go. And at the end of each section, for example, housing, if there's any public comment, I'll take some comments at the end of each section. So feel free to ask any questions as Libby or Tucker or any of the staff are reviewing their area and their goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Erica, could you get the PowerPoint up? In your packet should be a report on each goal, and this is simply the same thing except in a PowerPoint. So I guess, yeah. So your strategic plan currently was updated most recently in 2020, just about a year ago. You added a couple of goals in a focus area, and the focus areas are as shown here. There are 5 of them. And the next slide, please. Your plan, as is noted here, is guided by what we have called the principles of sustainability. I won't read all this, but there are a lot of departments and a lot of areas that contain these principles. And all of this is online as well. Your first focus area is housing. And the housing focus area has, I believe, 5 goals. And I am going to turn, I think it's 5. Hold on. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Yes, sorry. Your housing area has 5 goals. You added 2 additional goals last year. So you have have gotten some updates over the past 12 months about the housing goals. And so we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about what you've already heard. Tucker Holland, our housing director, is going to take you through these goals with focus on what's most recently occurred and accomplishments and what remains to be done and whether or not there are any obstacles that we may need your support or additional goals or feedback on. Tucker?
Thank you very much, Libby. And thanks very much to the board for the opportunity to give this update. I applaud the board a few years ago for setting out the strategic plan and really putting housing at the center of its priorities. As the board is well aware, a lot of progress has been made. We've increased our count of SHI units from 121 just a couple of years ago to 273 units today. The board had this initial goal of remaining in safe harbor for each of the next 3 years relative to Chapter 40B, and the board has done exactly that. We had our first period of safe harbor beginning in 2019 that lasted for 2 years. We recently entered a new period that presently runs until June 11th of 2022. I think the date on the slide here is slightly off, but that is in place already, and we are in the process of adding a second year to that, which would carry us to 2023. I think we could go to the next slide. I mean, this map really kind of encompasses what has been happening recently and what is on the runway. You will see Benjamin Drive to the left-hand side in the middle, 31 Fairgrounds Road just below that, and then to the far right, the Richmond Wildflower Acceleration. These collective 3 projects really represent the current period of safe harbor that we are in and that additional year, which I just spoke about. Following that, the properties at 135 and 137 Orange Street would provide an additional year. The UMass property, which we purchased last year, we, in conjunction with an additional property we are pursuing, would provide yet another or second year to that future year safe or future term of safe harbor. As well, the 6 Fairgrounds project, which was delayed due to lawsuit, is now moving forward. It has been awarded tax credits and additional subsidy. However, it's probably worth noting on that project that due to the delay, everyone is familiar with the greatly increased construction costs, and that is something we cannot overlook. And it may be that we need to provide some subsidy in the form of loan. This would not be a grant, but we may need to financially support that project if we now want to see it completed. And we're working with the developer to assess exactly what would be required there, as well as under what conditions we might provide that financial support. There were monies approved at last year's town meeting, which could go toward this purpose. But that is something that I think as a community, we have said we would like to see happen. So to sum up the safe harbor goal, we have been making strong progress and have a good path forward to remain in safe harbor on our way to our 10% requirement, which we would anticipate, based on what we know today, to occur sometime in the next 4 years, if everything moves forward as planned. Libby talked about what kind of support or obstacles there are. We may need some additional financial support. We are very grateful to the board and the voters for having supported over $45 million over the course of the last 3 years toward housing. It's a long needed significant down payment on addressing the year-round housing need, but without a doubt, more will be required. We could go on to the next goal. The next goal for the board was specifically to address the need of town employees. There is a project underway with regard to planning for seasonal housing at Waite Drive. There is a regular housing group which is discussing the needs in particular of year-round town employees. Now there are some challenges, mostly on the legal side at the moment, in terms of how to sort that out. As well, we are doing a comprehensive needs analysis with regard to the departments and anticipated retirements over the near term as well as long term. Next goal, please. This goal is around understanding at a deeper level the need at everything between 30% and 200% of area median income for the community. We have said at the Affordable Housing Trust, if you go back a few years, if we just threw a dart and hit the wall, we were making progress in terms of the need was so incredibly wide and still is in Nantucket. Just doing anything would be a positive result, but we're in the process of really refining our target. Everything that we do is around mixed income. So when you look across projects like 31 Fairgrounds or 6 Fairgrounds or the Richmond Wildflower Acceleration, they all are serving complementary income levels, not overlapping income levels. So we're making strides in addressing a variety of income needs, but we are also in the process of wanting to invest in greater understanding and data around the exact depth of need at every level. And we also, I would like to note, would love to have the Chamber of Commerce involved in this assessment. When David Martin was there, the Chamber was fairly active on the housing issue. It's been much less so in recent years. We look forward to maybe a return to their involvement in trying to understand their members' needs. Next slide, please. So this was a goal around incentivizing homeowners to use their secondary dwellings as year-round rentals, perhaps versus a short-term rental, and explore options for limiting the conversion of year-round housing to short-term rentals. When we talk about incentives, we're really generally talking about dollars. And when we think about, for instance, property tax abatement, the property tax levels here are so low that the financial incentive between renting on a year-round basis versus on a short-term basis is not there solely on tax abatement. So it's going to require some further thinking, and part of the limiting of conversion of year-round housing to short-term rentals may tie into something we'll get into a little more depth in the next slide, which is a community land trust. And we could go on to the next slide. So this is around a strategy for increasing home ownership opportunities for year-rounders, particularly in what we would call the middle income. And we have thought about the opportunity that creating a community land trust on Nantucket might provide in addressing this goal actually for several years. A number of us, including the town manager and the vice chair of the select board, made a trip to Martha's Vineyard with several others this summer to specifically investigate how the Island Housing Trust, which is a community land trust, is serving the needs on the vineyard. We think there is a lot that we can take from what they are doing and adapt that to our own special circumstances here on Nantucket. And therefore, the initial work on developing a community land trust for Nantucket is commencing now. And this really, we see, is the vehicle to homeownership opportunities for year-rounders as well. Probably what is most important in terms of what comes next, given where we are relative to the other goals that we have discussed. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, could I ask Tucker to go back for just a second to the town employee housing goal? I was somewhat multitasking, so I didn't totally get to weigh in on this one, but I wanted to mention, thank you, that as is noted here, we do have a regular housing group that meets, and we are really trying to think out of the box here with the housing for town employees. We're just as desperate as many other organizations are on the island. And we are mulling over whether or not we should submit a request for funding, possibly the purchase, if there even is such a thing, of a house or a duplex or some multifamily housing that the town would just own and have available for town employees. We're putting out an RFP for housing very shortly. Just, anybody have any housing out there? Multi-bedroom, one-bedroom, studio, anything. And the idea there would be, well, not totally anything, but you get the gist. And the idea would be that we would rent it until somebody has a need for it, which it would obviously be filled very quickly. We also have discussed, and I think we actually talked about this early on in a budget projection meeting, submitting a request to develop property on Tacoma Way, town-owned, for town employee housing. And actually, I haven't had a chance to further this, but Brooke Moore and I of the Affordable Housing Trust did have a discussion last week about the trust potentially funding some site design for something like that, so that we could potentially ask for construction funding at the upcoming town meeting. We really need to get on top of this. We're way behind with providing employee housing. We obviously will not be able to provide it for every single employee, but there are some pretty serious needs out there. And we, again, like many other groups, are having a lot of challenges attracting and retaining employees to work for the town because of housing. So I just wanted to add that, Tucker.
Thank you very much, Libby.
Questions or comments for Tucker? Matt?
Yeah, I have a few comments. I think it's time the town, I've been pushing for the town to get in the housing game for 20 years since I first ran, because, I couldn't be running a business without it. And I think the pandemic has just sped up what was going to happen anyway, and it's hitting everybody in the face. And so I think, and I think the town is fortunate. It has places that it could, it has land that it could put, great row houses, great density in keeping with what's already here. Places like Silver Street parking lot, and, there's places like that could be amazing, and people, for town employees, would want to live there. And so I think that's, Tacoma done properly is another place people would want to live. And so I think, it's great that we're heading that direction. I took part, as did a couple other people on the screen, with a Community Foundation board meeting yesterday, and housing was number one. And then there were a bunch of other issues, but as you started talking about the other issues, it seems to be it was all housing again. There aren't enough staff in many places because there's no place for them to live. And so it was eye-opening. Housing is number one. It's number one, and it's probably the next 5 or 6 priorities. Everything else is minor compared to that for most of these businesses. I think the chamber should be involved. It's in their self-interest to be more involved than they are. A lot of businesses very much struggled this summer. I had a couple other comments. the fairgrounds, the fairgrounds, I think we should be partnering. I don't think it should be a loan at a low interest, et cetera. I think we should be partnering with Hal Keen based on the percentage of income, the percentage of money that we have both put forth. If we have to put 2 million more up and we've already put up 5, then we've got 7 million in, skin in the game. We should look at how much skin in the game they have, and we should be general partnering with them on, based on how much we put forward. I just think that's, and that would mean more money potentially back. Some of the tax credits would come back to us, more money back for more development. So I just wanted to plant that seed because eventually we're going to have that conversation. And I think that we need to be thinking as like a developer would be thinking like a businessman would be thinking. Caution us on surveying. The school surveyed before it did the school housing. They surveyed their staff, built a lot of 3 bedrooms, and lo and behold, found out they needed, studios and 1 bedrooms. So I know we're probably not doing that survey, but you have to be projecting forward. And I think you're doing this, Tucker, but you have to be projecting forward to what will the need be for the various departments. It's going to most likely be younger people. It's going to be, first job, second job. Some of them aren't going to be. So you have to, sort of sort that out. I'm sure you're doing that. And the only final thing I had was incentives don't always have to be money. There's an incentive if you're giving development potential. And so if we are changing zoning in Hooper Farm or certain areas like that, and we say, oh, you can have 2 houses on this quarter acre now, but you'll be able to have 4 houses if 2 of them are permanently affordable, we're giving a ton of value. We don't need to throw any more money at it. We could still give them, we could be still giving, sewer breaks and everything else. But, I think when we give something, we should be getting something back, and it doesn't have to be an override. We can give value. When we make those changes, we are bestowing at town meeting, we're bestowing huge value on people, and we should be asking for something back from that. And when we do that, there should be design standards for those areas so they look great. And that's my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have a comment.
Sure, go ahead, Kadeem.
I just wanted to say that this housing really is also a topic of conversation just with people my age, really. I am 28 as of this July, and it's a time where a lot of people off island, it seems, are, buying houses really. And a lot of my friends here on the island are like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing wrong, really? Some of us work for the town. For one, I have another buddy who does as well. And we both, I feel weekly, it's the main topic of conversation is just like, what are we going to do? We can't stay here. It doesn't seem, or like, what is it? So I just wanted to, as someone this age, definitely mention that we are also, we're concerned. We are definitely interested to see what else the town can provide. We also want to help in whatever ways we can help, if there are any ways we can help. And that would be my comment. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kadeem. Any other comment, Christy?
Thank you. I first just wanted to thank Tucker and the Affordable Housing Trust and all the work they've done. I know the strategic plan was put into place before I got on the board, and all the progress that we've made in housing is just huge. You kind of make these tiny steps and then you look at it over the last 5 years, and it's really come a long way, and little pieces are starting to come together to put a really good puzzle together. I was just wondering, with Matt's comment about the community foundation and everybody is struggling with housing, if there's any partnerships between town and other organizations to maybe relook at the data needs. I know in the report that the Nantucket data platform didn't quite provide what we needed a couple of years ago, and maybe it's time to relook at some sort of study or another company that could do this to see kind of what are the needs for the next 5 years that we could start looking at.
Tucker,
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I would just mention that I had an opportunity recently to take a look at what the data platform actually has done in a 2.0 version for Charleston, South Carolina. I have to say it was pretty impressive. So they are actually going to come back to the trust either on the 19th or the 26th of this month to present their new version, if you will, of what they can do. I would say if it is accurate, it is exactly what we want.
That's good to know. Thank you, Tucker. Tucker, I just had one question for you. The community land trust. Can you just briefly talk about what gaps what would that allow us to do? Why is it different than some other, why do we need it? Must be different than other programs for funding. And is there anything the select board needs to do to help that from a policy standpoint?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to elaborate on the land trust. So a land trust, the fundamental way that a land trust works is essentially the land trust, which is a community asset, call it a nonprofit, owns the land. It owns the dirt, and the homeowner owns the home that is on the dirt, and they have a long-term 99-year lease sort of thing. So they can get financing to construct the home or make improvements to the home and so forth. And the benefit of that is several fold. It, first of all, takes the cost of the dirt out of the equation for the homeowner. And on Nantucket, as Nat Lowell famously says, it's all about the dirt. So we think that this may be a very good method to allow folks who can afford a decent mortgage, if you will, but can't, afford a market rate home, here on Nantucket today, that this may be what bridges that gap. And because the land is owned by the land trust, it will ensure that that property stays in the year-round family in perpetuity. So that the idea is when the current proverbial firefighter and teacher buy a home under the land trust model and they go to retire, the next firefighter and teacher would have the opportunity to go into that kind of thing. Not literally the same professions, but you get the idea.
How's it really funded? How's it worked in other communities? How they fund it? Is it taxpayer money? Is it private money?
So the concept that we're going to explore with this one is whether it could be a public-private partnership. I think there's a lot of private money that in the form of seasonal resident interest, largely, who see the problem and are sympathetic to the problem and want to be helpful in solving the problem, that may get behind a significant private contribution, perhaps to a pilot for this, to see how it works and then have that lead to further investment following the proof of concept. But it may be that we want some public money alongside that. So there's a lot of details, obviously, to this. We're fortunate that Philippe Jordy, who is the executive director of the Island Housing Trust and the Vineyard, has generously offered to advise us on and share foundational documents and operating procedures and so forth from the trust there on how we might go about doing this. And we are connected with a leader in the land trust movement, an attorney at Goulston and Stores in Boston, who can be advising us on the best way to go about this.
Thank you, Tucker. Any questions or comments? I had one more. Out of all of our goals, which is the most challenging of the housing goals? Which one are you scratching your head on the most? Safe harbor, we've been successful there.
I think the focus that the board has brought to this issue really through the strategic planning process has been invaluable. When I think about the question you asked, I think about having the opportunity a few years ago to hear a guy named Dan Palletta, who is a rock star in the nonprofit world, and the Community Foundation of Nantucket had the opportunity to bring him here for a conference several years ago. And Dan had the opportunity, Matt would like Dan because he thinks that the nonprofit world should bring more business thinking to how it operates. And I agree with him. But Dan had the opportunity to kind of take in things from the whole day. And at the end of it, he said, you know, I've been listening to all this, and you all in Nantucket are in a very unique situation. Like, given your geographic isolation, given the financial strength of your town, given the philanthropic community that you have access to and are blessed to have, he said, you can solve what are otherwise systemic problems in other places. Like, you can do it. Like, you have everything you need. It's just a matter of will. And so I think what the Select Board strategic plan has done these past few years is help to galvanize the will to address this problem. So which one of these scares me the most? None of them, if we keep moving forward with this will.
Well said, Tucker. Thank you. That was great. Anything else from the board? Any last comments from you, Tucker, before I go to the public?
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Tucker. We go to Gary Beller, who's been waiting patiently with his hand up.
Thank you, Jason. Tucker, you've been doing a fabulous job, and you have fabulous plans so far, and I think all of it is great. And it's not just the local residents that want to help you out. I think the seasonal residents would love to do the same. But there was one thing you said that I was a little bit disappointed when I heard and when I see what's going on, and it's something that I mean, Matt Fee referred to it as well, and that is the potential for putting up those 64 units at 6 fairgrounds. And the reason that I'm a little disappointed is that I know how we in the private sector, I'm retired now, but in the private sector, and I was for much of my career, head of corporate real estate for a major corporation. The private sector, what we would have done if we are building 64 units and a bunch of folks decide to stop us, and they sue us, and we fight them, and we win the first suit, and then they appeal, and we're delayed again. And then we fight them on the appeal, and then we win the appeal. And you know what that we would do in the private sector? The day the appeal judgment comes down, we would have shovels in the ground the next day. We wouldn't wait for another week. We wouldn't wait for another year. We wouldn't wait for someone to start appealing again. And so, I mean, Matt was referring to one possible solution to get a little additional funding that you might need. But to me, when you have a valuable concept like that, almost ready to go, you go through the litigation and you win it. Let's get going if we can. If there's anything we can do to speed that up, it would be great. That's 64 more units that we certainly need. I agree with everyone saying how important the housing issues are. Thank you for letting me talk about this. I appreciate it, Jason.
Thank you, Gary. Tucker?
Yeah, it's Gary. Thank you so much for your comments and moreover for your steady support of this issue for a number of years. I couldn't agree more that we don't want to let a nuisance lawsuit deter us from moving forward, and we're beyond it now, which is great. The simple reason for not like a shovel in the ground tomorrow morning is that this project has a a complex financing structure involving tax credits and other subsidies from the state. And it was terrific that these were all awarded recently. The developer has been working with the builder or contractor on really getting the cost down to whatever they can be in this current market. And then like very shortly, I'm talking about in the next week or two, we're going to know what that number is. And then as Matt said, I mean, I completely agree with Matt, and Matt knows it, that, you know, this is not free money. I mean, we're going to want something for this if we're being asked to do something that was never part of the deal in the first place. And us providing financial subsidy was never part of the deal. And the developer understands that. So we're fortunate that town meeting supported the resources that are necessary, perhaps to move this forward. And I would think in relatively short order, we will know whether, in fact, this can go forward. And there's a practical aspect that the tax credit awards are only good for a year. Like, they were awarded effectively, I think, last May, and they will expire this coming May. So they were awarded in June. They will expire next June, and therefore they need to close on the financing before that date, or they go away. And therefore there's a high motivation to move things along.
Thank you, Tucker. Okay, Olivia, I think we're ready for the next focus area.
Okay, the next focus area is transportation. We have 3 goals in this focus area. And I'm going to introduce Chief Pittman and Director of Planning Andrew Vorst to help me out with some of these. This first one relates to the downtown parking management system. And while we have not launched a fully integrated system at this point due to lack of staffing resources, but also a determination is needed by the select board as to whether or not to proceed with the paid parking system, which is a major component of this goal, potentially. The deployment of handheld license plate readers for parking enforcement was launched last summer, 2020, and continued through 2021. The data collected is awaiting analysis by the staff member who would typically be responsible for such an activity, which would be the transportation planner. That position is currently vacant. We are hoping to fill it, but it remains unfilled right at this exact moment. So, and just to remind the board that at town meeting in 2020, there was a citizen petition which sought to require the board to go to town meeting if it intended to launch a paid parking system. That is a non-binding question. However, when you all most recently discussed it about a year ago, the general determination was not to proceed with either going to town meeting or proceeding with paid parking at that time. And I think that had largely to do with COVID and, you know, the general economic conditions at that time. So that may be something you want to think about going forward. However, we most likely would not be able to launch paid parking for the summer of 2021 at this point, because we don't have the necessary staff resources in place, which was reviewed with you for the fiscal 22 budget. Chief Pittman, if you could speak on the specifics, I think, as to the use of the license plate readers and any other goal progress here. And Andrew, if you have anything as well.
Sure. Thanks, Libby. Well, we do have, last year we hired put out an RFP for a parking management system, parking enforcement system. And it was reviewed by Jason Schreiber to see that it met the standards which we'd all been talking. And a company was hired that started operating going into the summer. We have 4 handheld devices for enforcement. Now, one thing that you'll notice out there, there's both tickets generated by these handheld devices, and there's some officers that are still using the orange parking tickets. Well, this company takes those orange tickets and actually captures the data from those as well. So it all goes to the same database. Just one is instant, the other takes some time. So for the last year or 2 seasons, we've been using these devices and gradually increasing the capabilities of them. But what we are not able to do is any analysis of the data, just simply because nobody here has the skills to do that. But we have quite a lot of data in our system that is available for when eventually an individual's selected to do that. I've recently learned that the planning department is looking for a transportation manager, and I think there's some real potential for combining this parking coordinator position with that transportation manager position, and maybe get moving ahead sooner rather than later with that type of review and analysis. Right now, we have not had any urgency to hire a full-time year-round parking enforcement position, simply because we have had CSOs that are still here, and several of them are willing to stay for a while to continue enforcement. So we've been able to get the parking position or the enforcement position job description done. We're getting ready to post it, but that hasn't slowed us down at all as far as the enforcement side goes. And that's it.
Andrew, I don't know if you want to add anything before we go to questions.
Other than to, I guess, second what you said about, the position needs to be filled in the same sort of focus that, Tucker brings to housing. We need that same person bringing. We're hopeful that we'll find a candidate soon, but COVID and other sort of factors affecting this position, it has delayed it. So.
Thank you.
Libby, one thing I forgot is we have ordered additional handheld devices, but because of the chip shortage, we're not able, they've been on order for about 6 months, all summer, literally. And I don't have any idea when we'll get them, but hopefully by next summer, we'll go into it with 8 of them rather than just 4 of them.
Any comments from the board? Questions? Matt?
I think it's great. I think, trying to get 4 readers, 8 instead of 4, we're making progress. I think that's great. I still think we need a separate parking commission so that there's a group of 3 or 5 people with vested interests who are helping us to work through this. I don't think the select board is going to have the bandwidth to do that. I think I look at the data analysis and wonder if someone like Jason Schreiber would be able to take a look at that and for us in the short term. I don't want to see this. I'd like to see this put, maybe not this year, and I'll talk about well, my theory is we have to focus on hiring, and I think some of these things will maybe put aside to that. But short of that, I think this is a very crucial element of our transportation. I think it's long-term. This is the funding for the NRTA. Eventually, maybe the buses could even be free. And I think this is, this has a lot to do with funding alternatives and, helping to have a vibrant downtown and keep people moving. And so I just think there's a lot of reasons that this should not, not sort of go shouldn't smolder for 4 or 5 years. I think we need to keep a focus on this, and as much as possible. I think it was voted, it's important. I think we should have another vote. If we want to put this on hold, I think it should be a vote of the board to put it on hold, which I will oppose. But I would like to have it continue forward.
Christie?
Thanks. I agree with you, Matt. I think this is something that the board has agreed on in the past to move forward with paid parking. I think we've all discussed, at least recently, and how valuable parking is downtown when we're talking about not giving up spaces for restaurants or retail or closing down streets. We're saying it's so valuable, and yet we're not charging for those spaces or trying to find a way to improve the efficiency downtown so more people can enjoy our downtown. So I think if it needs to go back to town meeting or something needs to happen to help push this forward, I think that that's something that we need to either discuss tonight or have on an agenda item soon.
Thank you, Christie. Is there anything we need? Matt, go ahead.
Final comment. The reality is these are never popular. And change is never popular. Businesses are always worried about it. The public's always worried about it. But inevitably, with the reading that I've done, inevitably by year one or two, once the changes have gone through, people are like, how did we get by without it? Boy, that was great. And so I just think we're going to take some bullets and, as we did at last town meeting, people that are used to parking, all day downtown, or they have their private spaces, they don't want things to change. It's how we all are. People will adapt. And I think that we have to, have the, read about it and research it and understand what this process will be and have the courage to keep plugging away at it.
Anybody else? Any comments? Matt, Christie, were you wanting a motion or maybe another agenda item where we can dig into it more and determine what continue going forward, what that means? Christie?
Yeah, I guess just a feeling from the board, if this is something the rest of the board wants to see move forward, if that could be discussed tonight, or if we need to have some more information in a separate agenda item.
Yep. I personally am fine moving forward. I just kind of want to know what does that mean with chips, with staffing shortages. Is this year to take it to town meeting? Is it? It was a battle the first time around, and it was the business owners who want to park downtown, and workers. It was kind of coming from all sides, and like you said, Matt, it was change. And I think one of the things that we discussed was, well, if we get more data, if we could show people how it could work, we could say, see, look, we have all this data now, which kind of supports what we're thinking. It would be a little easier. And I think that started, Chief, but not maybe as much as we wanted. So Melissa, you had your hand up.
I was going to suggest making it an agenda item for a different night, because I think there are a lot of variables, and I'd like to get through the rest of the strategic plan packet and not get derailed. But I think it should be an agenda item, and I think we should figure out what we mean by moving it forward.
Thank you. Dawn?
I agree with Melissa. I think it should be an agenda item and have people a little more on notice to have this discussion in further detail.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we all want to move forward in some way. We need more information at a separate agenda item. Matt, Christie, you go to that? Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, next goal we have here under this focus area is to complete at least one, if you can go back to the PowerPoint, Erica, to complete at least one sidewalk route connection from Mid-Island to the ferries. This goal hasn't been fully implemented, although there has been progress with sidewalk improvements as shown here. Washington Street area, we have bike lane marked out from Milestone to Landmark. There's been some improvements to Easy Street and Lower Broad Street sidewalks and some other items as noted under completed activities. Funding has been secured for the reconstruction of Newtown Road. Design is underway for sidewalk improvements in the Pleasant Street between Williams Lane and Five Corners area. with some other items noted here under ongoing activities, Washington Francis Union and the widening of the intersection there, along with improved sidewalks. These are large projects that need staff oversight, and the Washington Street project is going to need some additional funding. But without a public works director and the transportation manager, these things are not really feasible to get done at the right this moment. But they are definitely on the schedule in the queue to move ahead as soon as those positions are filled.
Comments from the board?
Okay. The next goal there is to shift the mode of commuters from driving alone to using other modes by 6%. If we can go back to the PowerPoint again, thank you. This goal most certainly requires the expertise of a transportation planner or a manager, and it goal has been affected by COVID definitely impacted this goal as well. So we can't even really use our traffic counter at Goose Pond Lane at this point without somebody to really manage it. So there are things ready to go. They're sort of shovel ready-ish, but data needs to be gathered and interpreted and analyzed and put into use by an expert. Andrew, do you want to add anything to that?
On this particular goal, and this was something that Mike Burns was very interested in, is that it's an ambitious goal, and it really needs, as the second bullet talks about, is what's the control group that we're talking about? Who are we really? Where are we trying to make this particular another? I mean, we really, it needs the specific professional attention that was mentioned before.
Yeah, Libby, I think this is, if I remember correctly, we're trying to find a way to see to measure success. And like you said, Mike Burns was really passionate about this, said this is a way to do it. It's difficult. You need a transportation planner and probably some outside help to really figure it out, to get a baseline to see if there's any difference. But I think that was the best way we could come up with, trying to see how effective we were in this area. So good goal. Christy?
Thanks. If I remember correctly, I think Mike used to use data from the census and the American Community Survey. So that was the baseline of watching that trend over time. So I think when we have somebody back in that position, we'll have at least a data point to look at this over time.
Thank you, Christy. Any thoughts or comments on this one? Matt?
Yeah, I don't think we need a transportation, the public, from what I've heard, we don't need a transportation planner to tell us there were more people this summer driving more quickly and more, at least in my business, more bike accidents than I've ever experienced. I don't think we need, degrees and all sorts of fancy stuff to know that. And that was we shouldn't forget the complaints and the refrain that we got this summer. The comments we all received this summer.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, it's like we're all set there, Libby, on that goal.
Thank you. Next focus area is environmental leadership. We have two goals here, and we're going to hear from our recycling coordinator, Graham Durovich, and our solid waste consultant, George Aronson, for the first one, which relates to providing data-driven recommendations on island-wide solid waste management. The second goal, we'll hear from Natural Resources Director Jeff Carlson, which relates to an island-wide long-term water quality management plan. And with respect to this first goal, Graham and George, I think, will take us through just a general summary update here. But there are so many aspects to this goal and so many different things at play here that we are going to be seeking a workshop with the board specific to long-term solid waste management issues and planning and programs. So I've emailed you all about a November date for that. And that's a date that works for staff. So we hope that that can be set up and we can really dig into things at that meeting. But in the meantime, Graham and George will be giving us an overview here. We did meet a couple of weeks ago with Waste Options, and that was a very good meeting, but there are a lot of issues here. And I asked Graham to also give a bit of a summary about the take it or leave it. And I really want to caution people, as much as everybody loves to take it or leave it and wants it to open again, which we are planning to do, it is a massive undertaking to operate that facility now in light of COVID. It was a massive undertaking before COVID, which people didn't necessarily realize, but there are a lot of things that happen in that take it or leave it area that are not appropriate, and things dropped off there that aren't, I don't know what the word is, Graham, you might have better words than me. They're not pleasant, they're not appropriate, they're not legal. And people, are not responsible sometimes with what they bring to the take it or leave it. And it really requires some oversight and management, and it cannot be done by volunteers. So we're working very hard to get the facility open and have plans for expanding it and improving it. But please, people, when you're getting ready to dump everything you've been saving up for the past 2 years at the take it or leave it, be gentle and patient with how this is going to go, because it's going to be a lot. Graham and George.
Thank you, Libby, and thank you to the board for having us. It's great to give an update of where we are with this and where we have to go. And we do look forward to a workshop coming up. So I'll run you through a few of the first things, and then some of the last things, and I'm going to let George speak about some of the more long-range planning for solid waste. In terms of reducing waste amounts and toxicity, while many aspects of this have been completed, this is always going to be an ongoing goal in direct correspondence to both the strategic plan goal as well as the state's solid waste management plan, which includes a goal of 90% waste reduction by 2050. It's not an insignificant number. With education and outreach, there's been numerous ways forward with that. The website is much more updated than before with a lot more information for our community. We've been doing some school programming. We've been having more success with better outreach through more accessible news outlets than previously we were doing. And the litter derby has raised some good awareness about what's out there and how we can make a difference on a daily basis with covering our loads, and what are the spots and what are the items that people are often littering. Nip bottles, for instance, and dog poop bags and cigarette butts are among the more common intentional litter. And the 2020 plastics ban, there's been significant outreach efforts with that. And we're getting to a place where we really need some enforcement at that level. The Nantucket data platform project has been completed. It didn't really pan out, unfortunately, but it did highlight some known data needs, as well as some issues with our current contract that we need to be keeping in mind as we look towards 2025, when the waste services agreement that we currently have expires. I'm going to pass it off to George Aronson now, the town's solid waste consultant, to share, what we're looking at in preparation for the expiration of the current waste services agreement in 2025. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Graham. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Libby, and thank you to the board for having us here today. I think the RFEI stands for Request for Expressions of Interest. It was a process that the town went through earlier this year to go out basically to the universe of solid waste management service providers in preparation for 2025. Again, the town handles most of the solid waste that's generated on island, not all, but most, through multiple facilities at 188 Nantucket Road, the composter, the materials recycling facility or the MRF. There's a transfer station for construction demolition debris. There are collection areas for everything from leaf and yard waste to electronic to e-waste to freon coils and appliances and everything else you can imagine that gets generated. And then there's the landfill. And all of those right now are operated on behalf of the town under a single contract, the waste services agreement with Waste Options, and it expires on November 30th, 2025, which means we got 4 months, or rather 4 years and 6 months to figure out what the next generation of solid waste management looks on Nantucket, and it's an awful lot of work. In the RFEI, the premise set out a couple of key questions, and we're going to be looking, now that we made some progress in getting information and data in response to those questions, to get a sense of the board and get guidance from the board and where to go. One is the future of the composter. There are lots of reasons why the best thing for the town going forward would be to continue using the composter on some basis. Exactly what that looks like requires a lot of thinking and maybe some changing of the way waste is handled. It may mean changes in the way waste is collected. It may mean changes in how the compost is produced to get a quality that's marketable on the island, which is the goal. And it also means dealing with PFAS, which is an issue that is everywhere or in many places on Nantucket, and it affects the landfill and may affect the compost as well. And so that's a whole area of inquiry that we've started to work on and to get information on. The second piece of this is, if the town does not continue composting, what are the alternatives? Are there technologies out there to handle all or perhaps some of the solid waste that are generated on island? I think the RFEI generated a number of technology proposals, got a lot of interesting information how we might do that. There are opportunities. There's no obvious clear favorite opportunity, but it does lay out some dimensions of what the business decisions might look like, what the technology choices might look like, what the collection changes might have to be if that were to be part of the package starting in 2025 or beyond. And so I think that is helpful information going forward. The third thing we've done is walk through and done some assessment of the status of the materials recovery facility, the MRF. I think the good news is that recycling markets seem to be turning around. In fourth quarter of fiscal year 21, the town actually made money, got a $15,000 credit on its costs for recyclables that were collected on island as compared to 2020, when the town was paying to make sure the recyclables moved. So the markets are going in a direction, but there is work to be done in terms of the MRF building and facilities itself. It's 25 years old. It needs some upgrades, it needs some work, and it also needs to be coordinated with the rest of the system in a way that works for all parts of the system. And at risk of making things simple, if you look at the pile of clear plastic bags that got dumped in the MRF when we were there at the end of September, and you can imagine what it takes to sort through, open each and every one of those bags, figure out which goes where and how to get there. It's a big effort, and there ought to be a better way to do it. It turns out there are options we're learning about. There are bag breakers. There are ways to perhaps put different materials in different color bags, and that might make it, and if that's a project that works, it might make it easier to sort the materials, etc. So it's not only the facility, it's how it interacts with collection how it interacts with the equipment, and where it goes and what goes to what facility. So I think these are all issues that are under consideration as we look at the MRF condition and look at the results of the RFEI. What we have done that's ongoing is assemble some of the key questions into what we like to call a decision matrix or a strategy. Are you going to use the composter? If you do, what does that mean? If you don't, what are the options? What else can you do besides compost? And if there's nothing else to do, what does it take to move materials off the island, and what does that look like? So we have a sort of a map of strategy, and then getting information on each piece of the map, which we'd like to share with the select board going forward. And we certainly, the good news is that even though 2025 seems like it's right around the corner, and it is, we do have a lot more information on those alternatives and what they might look like and their interactions that, you know, we're happy to discuss. And some early impressions, just to let's go forward on a high level. Again, we have some plans, and it looks like the best outcome would be to continue to operate the composter if the PFAS issue and the quality issues can be addressed. In fact, we made a lot of strides in quality. I think Libby received a bag or two of compost recently. She's happy to share with you. And so there's some reason for optimism here, but there's still work to be done. One issue we'd like to discuss is diverting paper from the composter to the MRF, which had been done before and maybe ought to be done again in 2022. Might make it easier to compost the organics without some of the paper in it. The third issue is the whole issue of business arrangements. Part of the Waste Services Agreement is that the town has an option to buy the composter, and whether or not it should exercise that option at one terms is a subject that we look to guidance from the select board. Hosting of technology. Again, there are a number of emerging technologies for treating plastics, for treating non-recyclable components of the waste stream that might make sense on Nantucket at the scale at which they're available. And so we'd like to look at pilot programs, ship some material off to those facilities where they exist, and possibly host a pilot on Nantucket if we can make that work as well. So I think that's a whole other area of inquiry. How do you procure it? What are you looking for? What are the minimum requirements, and what makes a particular proposal advantageous? And finally, I think the Waste Services Agreement itself is 20 years old. It's been unsatisfactory in many ways. What are the business arrangements that would give clear services, clear costs for each service that would be provided, and that would put the town in a much better position to manage solid waste going forward? I think, and we learn a lot about that as well. I think there are a couple of the decisions to discuss. There is an option to purchase the composter, but there may be a reason to also look at purchasing the transfer station, and we'd like some guidance on that and how to think about how to approach that. The landfill phases 1A, 1B, and 1C are the inactive areas. The mining project stopped in 2019. It's on hold pending the PFAS assessment of the landfill, which will affect the closure. But there's also not only the question of closure, but potential post-closure uses. Again, looking for guidance there. There are very limited post-closure uses of a landfill, but there are a few options there as well. And finally, I think as we look at the options, to the extent that the board can give advice on narrowing those options, there are projects that have been around for a long time when it just may not make sense, that it maybe makes sense to officially take off the table as part of a greater discussion. So I think that's the higher level discussion. It's hard to say that anything's completed because so much is ongoing, but we have made a lot of progress in understanding the problem, collecting data and information to shed light on what the decisions are and what the choices and trade-offs really are. So I think that's the optimistic approach, and we still do have some time. So again, I want to thank everyone for hearing this out. I'm happy to answer questions from whoever, but at this point, I'll turn it back to Graham to go through the last item.
Thank you, George. So the take it or leave it is another big portion of solid waste management and the future of solid waste, particularly in light of our goals of sustainability locally, as well as the state's goals for municipalities and businesses going forward. We're excited that Take It or Leave It is finally coming back soon. We're hoping to reopen in November. There will be significant changes to the operation to make it safer, cleaner, and more sustainable, both environmentally, socially, as well as fiscally. So I just want people to be aware of it. It will be different than before, but this is the way we can reopen it. So this will include separate leave it and take it areas, as well as screening of incoming materials and items, as the town manager mentioned. So there will be items that will be refused from the take it or leave it. Heads up about that. We also need some major capital investments going forward towards improvements and to make the operation more sustainable. The building that we currently have is far too small, and there's some significant opportunities with the take it or leave it, as well as other reuse opportunities that extend all the way into deconstruction and salvage, which would have to be a separate operation, but really worth the town spending some significant time looking into. There has been some local research into this, and we do have a WPI student team coming this fall to focus on this. Holly Backus, Lauren Sinatra, and I have been talking about this internally, though. We will be looking for a police detail for when Take It or Leave It reopens. Unfortunately, there are some rather horrible instances that happen with patrons of the Take It or Leave It, and it's really not okay for the attendants to have to deal with that. So we're going to be looking towards no tolerance for that going forward. And as a reminder, to make the Take It or Leave It and actually make sure your items are most sustainably dealt with, you can find a direct home for it rather than bringing it to an open area. So there are numerous sites, both Facebook as well as Reuse Exchange. And you can always check the Take It or Leave It website for the town for a list of how to get rid of those items more directly to make sure they actually find a home. One thing that many people might not realize is that previously when the Take It or Leave It was open, about 4 tons a week of material was thrown away when we would do the complete clean outs that would take the entire DPW staff on Thursday mornings. Just one instance of how the previous operation was not sustainable and why we will be looking when we reopen to refuse items that do not belong in there, including prescription medications, hazardous waste, and numerous other items. So keep an eye out on that. We will be advertising information about that prior to reopening. Moving on, plastics ban and bylaws. The waste reduction interns this summer visited the vast majority of businesses that needed to come in compliance with the 2020 plastics ban and did little informal audits. It took a significant amount of time. And there are a couple more businesses that I am following up with, and then we'll be looking for the health department to follow up with the businesses that were not in compliance and doing some checks. We do want to celebrate the businesses that are in compliance though, so keep an eye out for a list that will be coming out through likely social media. Illegal dumping is an ongoing issue, as well as littering, as I'm sure you are all aware from when you walk around or Facebook posts and such. Surveillance cameras would be very helpful in numerous areas, and we need a big attitude change, quite frankly. We all see it. Education and outreach, we touched on that as some of the completed activities, but as always, that is ongoing. Working on building solid waste management and understanding into school curriculum. And some of the items George mentioned about recycling paper and such would bring us into compliance, or not, sorry, it would align us rather with the rest of the state's waste management practices and recycling practices. And that would open a whole suite of outreach opportunities and materials that we could use locally. And that would be huge for outreach. Enforcement, again, is big, and we could use enforcement not just with the plastics ban, but at the take it or leave it, at the drop off, at the commercial waste drop off areas as well, where the C&D is accepted and beyond. So something to keep in mind. I'll leave it there for now. We look forward to a workshop with you hopefully soon, where we can discuss this in more detail. We could really use some direction from you all on how to proceed for a lot of these long-term goals and plans for solid waste. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Graham and George. I don't know if anybody has any questions. And again, we definitely want to get this workshop underway.
Matt?
Yeah, one question and one comment. First question, Graham, what happens with pallets?
Pallets are clean wood, so they come in and they actually can be brought in for free by anyone to the scale house. And Waste Options removes the nails and turns it into mulch, grinds it up essentially and turns it into mulch for the most part, or uses it in the biofilter.
Right. In my comment, I was looking out. I ended up with a pile of pallets, and my hauler takes them, and they go away. But I was thinking to myself, it seems such a waste. I had 3 brand new pallets. They had never been used before. They were brand new, and I'm just thinking that's what's gonna happen to them. In the old days, Stephen Bedian, who drove one of the trucks for U.S. Food, he would pick up pallets at the end of his run, and he got like $5 or $7 a pallet off island. And to me, he was backhauling the pallets, and he made money. He pocketed $300-400 every trip, and we've lost. I just think it's sort of anyway. I just think there's got things like that are built to be reused. I wish we'd find a way to get them back off the island and reused. And then my comment is, whatever we do, I would like to find a way, whatever technology we pursue, to mine the landfill and meaningfully mine it, because it is in a storm tide pathway. I don't want my kids in 30 or 40 years to have to hard armor the landfill to protect it from going out to sea, or 50 years, 70 years. I think whatever we do, whatever we try to point, what direction we point, should be able to handle what's there. It might not happen in year 1 or even year 5, but at some point it would be great to take all the old tires and all the old stuff that's there and turn it into energy, or turn it into something else, or bring it, deal with it. And so, I'm going to be pushing for that. I think I'll put my coastal resiliency hat on and push for that when we have these discussions. And that's all for now.
Thank you for your comment about the pallets. That's good to know. There's numerous opportunities that we need to take advantage of. The take it or leave it and the textile collections, in the meantime, are one such example. We finally made a connection with Salvation Army as somebody who could receive a lot of these good items off island. And so instead of throwing away 750 to 1,000 books a week, as we were previously doing with the take it or leave it, it will all get shipped to Salvation Army. And previously, the cost of throwing 4 tons into the C&D building, it was at $428 a ton. And with our textile collections, as an example, we've been diverting that at about $55 a ton. So significant financial savings for the town, as well as being socially and fiscally socially and environmentally more responsible. So hopefully we can see more and more of that in the future.
My only other quick comment is 2025 is in government time. That is tomorrow. Moving at the speed of government, 2025 is, a week. We've got to really, this is going to take some real effort.
It would be great to have some input from you all on the board to help us move forward. We've been doing a lot of internal work, and we could really use some guidance. Thank you.
And I can't agree with Matt more on that. 4 years in the solid waste business is a blink of an eye.
Any other comments? Okay. Thank you, George. Thank you, Graham. Is that everything for solid waste? Libby?
Yes.
Okay.
The next goal is the long-term water quality management plan. If we can get to the PowerPoint again, just to show that. And Natural Resources Director is going to give us an update on this one.
Sure. Thank you, Libby. Good evening, everyone. Like everyone else, thank you guys for having us and getting an update on this. I know these are all initiatives that we've been plugging away on through COVID and haven't been in front of you guys as much as we'd like for lots of obvious reasons. So like other goals, we've been still making progress and been trying hard to get there. To kind of follow up from our last update where we went on some of these things, the good news that we have is we've completed a draft of the actual island-wide long-term water quality plan. We're ready for the select board to review, much like solid waste. We'd like to get it in front of you guys, get some thoughts, questions, concerns, but also get a chance to get it in front of the public and get their questions and concerns, especially as they relate specifically to folks that might live in these watershed areas, to hear how it may impact or suggestions that they have for how they're going to implement that in their neighborhoods. That being said, we already have had our internal review, our internal team, led with our water quality specialist, Thais Fournier. We tapped into the water company, to the sewer department, health department, our department. We reviewed the plans with a number of local nonprofits, including the Land Bank and the Conservation Foundation, and really feel like we've put together a pretty solid plan to kind of lead the way forward in our water quality goals for our surface water bodies. And I think the important part of that is it may not answer all of the questions, but it provides us the information that we need to put together, whether it's specific actionable items or projects to really affect some of these watersheds in a meaningful way, that this provides kind of the backing and kind of the framework that we can use and share to help other people do that. So I think we're ready to get that in front of you guys whenever you're ready to have that discussion and go forward with that. Other great activities that we've had going on that relate to this. We've been really trying to increase our public outreach on water quality, even outside of regular website and social media postings. But in the last year, we've also been able to launch our water quality analysis viewer that we developed with MITC grant, and that makes all of the town collected data publicly accessible to anyone that can get on the internet, and they can search by parameters, search by location. It's tied into nationally available data too, weather data. It's a really powerful tool. We did a webinar with a developer to help people learn. That's available to see on YouTube. And we're happy to also answer questions for those folks or people that are interested in using it. But we really wanted to make it, map-based and graphical so people can connect to the data that they're most interested in and affects them the most to help inform, other management discussions that we have. So that's been a really great tool. Other projects have been going on. The watershed report on the Children's Beach Pump Station. That draft report was put out and completed. Rob McNeil brought that to us shortly before he moved on. And we've been reviewing that internally as well and have some questions. And there have been a number of kind of other pieces to the puzzle that have come in with land bank projects for how they may implement drainage within areas like the Lily Pond, which is in that watershed area too, and some of the other areas along Westchester Street and Cliff Road, and how they'll all kind of tie in. So there's a little bit of work to do there, but we feel really comfortable that we're making good progress, and hopefully we'll have at least a proposal for that put together relatively soon. Kind of going on, our regular water quality is still happening. We're doing that every year. We've just completed our field season. We'll have that report shortly. Project that we're excited about, we just completed our third year of real-time bay scallop and eelgrass population surveys within Nantucket Harbor. We're hoping to expand that to Madaket Harbor in the next 12 to 24 months as well. Our teams worked really hard to do that. We've been working with Stephen Heck out of Stony Brook University to do that project. And we'll have that report up, and hopefully we'll even be starting to maybe add some of that eelgrass mapping into GIS layers perhaps in the near future. Last but not least, then I'll turn it over to my tag team partner, Roberto Santamaria, to talk about PFAS and pools. But we've also been working and kind of working with David Gray at the sewer department as far as, enhancing some testing and some surface water testing to really start dialing in some of the sewer projects that they've been moving forward on. They've been doing an awesome job in rolling sewers out to other areas of the island and getting those activated, but also how can we, support the work that they're doing by collecting data and processing data to show what's happening in real time. And one of the studies that we're looking to do kind of going forward is to re-identify the Nantucket Harbor watershed and also look at nutrient groundwater flows and what kinds of nutrients are getting to the harbor where and in what rates. So we can really start to narrow down tools for neighborhoods to be able to say your input is related mostly to septic and sewer. It's related mostly to fertilizer or to stormwater, and put that together and kind of fuel, all of our stormwater initiatives with that kind of information and really, dial in and drill down to neighborhood by neighborhood to really get the biggest bang for our buck. So we're excited that all of this is included in the water quality plan and to have that discussion. And with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Roberto to talk about PFAS and the illicit discharge regulations.
Thank you, Jeff. So where we are with PFAS is actually, it ties in very well with some of the Great Harbor Yacht Club grant that Jeff was mentioning right before us, because what we're doing is now looking into where we are and trying to categorize how PFAS looks on the island. You hear it being told as a contaminant of emergent concern. What it really comes down to is that we've known it's an issue for a long time, for decades. The United States banned Teflon decades ago. So one of the things that we're seeing is now we know how dangerous it is. So now we're looking for it. So what we're going to start looking at, and you may hear Chuck Larson, Greg Tivenin, and I talking about this more often over the next few weeks, months, years, and possibly decades, is how persistent PFAS is in our environment and in everything we own. You may have known it as Teflon, which was a polyethylene terephthalate. That's PETF. PTFE, polytetrafluoroethylene, was Teflon. And then you also knew it as Scotchgard, Gore-Tex, Next Gen. So it's in almost everything. And now we're just trying to quantify where it is. We've been working with UMass and DEP in order to do test wells across the island. You may have seen recently on one of the morning blogs, I forgot which one it was, not Daybreak, the other one, was posting Current. The Nantucket Current this morning post about PFAS and the 50 wells that were approved. I was corrected this morning. It was actually 40 wells that got tested, and we're still waiting to hear back from all the processes. But we are seeing some positive hits. The maximum contaminant level in the state of Massachusetts is 20 parts per trillion. The federal maximum contaminant level is 70 parts per trillion. So you'll be hearing a lot of conversations about that. Next week, on Thursday of next week at 5:30, we will be doing a PFAS public forum with Angela Gallagher from DEP, from Mass DEP, and discussing the UMass project in more depth. That will be moderated by Julia Novak and from Raftelis Consulting Group, and it will be Angela, Mark from the water company, and myself. And then after that, we're looking at the pools, where we've had a discussion about pools over the course of the last few years, and illicit discharges. So a lot of times you'll hear about water being dropped off into, and we've talked about it here at the select board many times and at the Board of Health, of when pools getting drained, when sump pumps get drained, sometimes when construction gets done and they're pumping water out of the area while the construction is being done. It has to be properly discharged. It can't just run over the road. It can't be chlorinated, things like that. So Jeff and I have been working together and recently submitted a copy to to administration for review by council, a regulation that we can use to start looking at these discharges and to be able to enforce the way to properly discharge. Because when you start emptying out a pool, saltwater pools, if they haven't been equalized, is really a tough one. And same with chlorinated pools, you have to dechlorinate them ahead of time. If that isn't done, you're actually breaking, depending on where you are, you're breaking the Clean Waters Act. So it's a big deal. And with that, I believe that's everything. And I'll turn it back over to the team.
Yeah, I think with that, we're happy to take any questions or comments that you guys have. And like we said, we're looking forward to sitting down with the actual water quality plan and having a good discussion with you folks on whether we're in the right direction or what additions or subtractions we need to make.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Roberto. Matt? You're muted, Matt.
Again, a couple comments, a couple questions. First, just a comment. Yeah, saltwater pools, we all thought they were great, and come to find out, a chlorine pool, if it's left properly for the chlorine to dissipate, is relatively safe. And, a lot of places allow that to go into the water. Once it's been tested and, and proven to be safe, they allow that to be discharged into water bodies. Saltwater pools, a lot of places do not allow, because those have forever chemicals that are created that cannot be taken care of. And I didn't know that. I just assumed, oh, salt water, that's great. But it's actually the opposite. So I'm glad that you guys are looking at that, number one. Number two, I think fertilizer is one of the main controllables, and that we've been trying to work on, and and Jeff has been trying to work on. And one of the problems is we hear that we don't have any ability to regulate it. There's nothing we can do. Well, came to my attention recently that Martha's Vineyard and Cape Cod are allowed to regulate fertilizers. They are designated as District of Critical Planning Concern, and with that designation, they are allowed to regulate it. So is that something? Are we considering amending our special act for the Planning Commission? And are we considering adding that ability to the island? It seems like something we should do.
Look into it.
Jeff, wasn't this something previously sent to the Planning Commission?
We've sent some amendments to our existing regulations to them before briefly, and we've been talking about that through the Fertilizer Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, that committee kind of slowed down during COVID. But that's something we're looking to re-engage, but we'll certainly look into that, Matt, and get back to you in short order with that answer.
Yeah. That would be great, because I think it's something we really should do. I mean, there's precedent for it. There's other communities that do it. And it's, as you all know, we've all been on the board for a while. It's one of the biggest inputs that we can control. There's a lot of that we can't control, but that's one we can, and we should.
Thank you, Matt. Any other comments? Okay, we have one hand up in the public. Can we go to Deanne Atherton? Go ahead, Deanne, if you can hear us. Deanne, can't hear anything.
Maybe I'll try to take her out and bring her back in.
Sure. Still don't hear anything.
Yeah.
Looks like she went off, came back in, also tried the same thing. How about now? Jeff, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if Deanne has a question related to our goal and the water quality plan, Deanne can feel free to send an email or call tomorrow, and I'm happy to talk to her about it, to try to answer any question that she has.
Okay. Deanne, can you hear us? Okay, we'll try again here in a little bit. Anything else for Roberto or Jeff? Everybody good? Okay. Thank you. Thank you both.
Okay, moving on, I guess. The next focus area is efficient town operations. We have two goals in this area. The first is to develop a facilities master plan. We've held 3 workshops in the past 10 months on this subject, including the most recent one in August. We have a lot of different things underway with this, including a contract we have signed with Weston and Sampson to review concessions. We are planning to put forward funding requests in connection with design for our island home at a location at Sherburne Commons, funding for design of a municipal facility at the 2 Fairgrounds Road site, and some other various actions in connection with facilities. And I think we've most recently, I definitely have a backup in my email, and I think I most recently sent you all the compilation of what occurred at the August facilities meeting. If I didn't, if that doesn't ring a bell, let me know and I'll send it out again. We definitely need staff resources to progress this goal a little more quickly. We are currently without a facilities director at DPW, and of course, without a DPW director. And some other staffing issues have surfaced and become a little problematic with getting this goal a little moved along, but we're doing what we can to get it progressed. The next goal is to invest in technology. This is a bit of a vague goal, but Karen McGonigal, our information systems director, information technology. What are you, Karen? Information technology.
Chief Technology Officer.
Sorry, there's too many director officer people. In any event, Karen has been very diligently working on a variety of things. She's going to give us an update on this one. And I just want to add, though, that a lot of Karen's time and her staff's time in the past, I don't know, year, Karen, has been very much devoted to cybersecurity. And they are doing a great job keeping us, fingers crossed, out of any difficulties with that. But there is a very active training program, constant reminders about it, and it definitely takes a lot of time. Karen?
Yep, I put myself on mute there for a moment. Okay, so I will go through this briefly as it's getting kind of late. Under completed activities was to review the requirements for municipal broadband, and I had reviewed that with the board at a previous time. And so we're not going to go through that in detail, but essentially what that means is in order to provide a broadband internet access to private residences and businesses on our own, we would have to develop a MLP or municipal light plant. And that goes through a process of town meeting votes and to the state legislature to develop this in much the same manner as an enterprise fund. At this time, it's my understanding that the board is not pursuing this, but if they do decide to look into it at a future date, I'd be more than willing to share more detailed information on how that happens. Excuse me, allergies. The ongoing activities are to add public Wi-Fi within 1 mile of Pacific National Bank, and what's in the works right now at the moment is to leverage the existing wireless access point in the smart street lamp in the horse fountain on Lower Main Street. That was set to go, but with the busyness of the summer season and the loss of the DPW director, doing the excavation between the street lamp, and where the services would have to be located in Cole Alley was not feasible. But the funding is available in capital under IT infrastructure to get this work done. It does require significant collaboration with the Department of Public Works, so that potentially holds this up as well. To provide the Comcast service for this one activity is going to be on a request on the FY23 budget as an ongoing operating service. So that is in place to move forward as soon as we are able to get all the ducks in the row and get everything in place to implement it. Excuse me. The same thing holds true for public Wi-Fi at Surfside and Jetties beaches. And these two are a little bit more complicated, where we are able to put in a Wi-Fi hotspot in both of those locations. That would really be a short-term solution, because with the facilities master plan containing the concessions master plan, integrating Wi-Fi access to the public should be part of that overall concessions master plan. So it's all one large project that would work smoothly together. So like I said, we can put in a individual Wi-Fi hotspot at both of those locations as a short-term solution. And again, the service for Comcast for that will be on fiscal year 23 budget request. Okay, expanding and improving cell service across the island. I believe we had provided a written update on this, but essentially cellular providers are constantly adding antennas to their existing distributed antenna systems around the island. They bring these requests regularly to the select board, and in general, most the requests are approved. They do provide better service, but they do not provide the same level of service that the large scale antenna systems off island do. Those are those big antennas that you see posted around in high areas, and those are not practical or practical for the island due to we're very flat. They would stick up, they'd be ugly, and nobody really wants them in their backyard. So we are limited essentially to these DAS antennas at this point, but the carriers are doing their best to expand these antennas and improve service as best they can within the restrictions on the island. The not yet started activities include public Wi-Fi across the island, except for Great Point and Cove 2. This is kind of a gray area. I'm really looking for some guidance from the select board is what your definition of what is your vision for public Wi-Fi across the island? Are you looking at something like what we're looking to do downtown, where we start out with a hotspot and then perhaps expand it out with other access points that talk to each other, creating what's called a mesh network? So that would expand the access within a geographic location where these access points would have direct sign of light sight lines to each other. Or are you, so that would probably look like putting these hotspot networks in Sconset, for example, or out at the Tom Nevers Park, or out in Nantucket in the more densely populated areas? Or are you envisioning this to actually be the broadband internet service that you are hoping to bring to residences and businesses? So I would be looking to the select board for some guidance on what your vision of what this would look like before I could actually develop a realistic plan on pursuing that. Let's see if I missed anything. No, I don't think so, unless you're looking for more details such as pricing and timelines. So if anybody has any questions about any of these, I'd be glad to answer the questions.
Any questions for Karen? Karen, when you were asking that question, did you want this to get into that now, or is that a separate agenda item later?
I think it should be a separate agenda item because it probably is going to take a little bit of time for a discussion. So yeah, probably a future agenda item.
Okay.
And then I could give a further update on the other activities as well at that time.
Okay, I think it'd be a good thing to discuss. When you said, do you want this or this? I was thinking both, but need to see what the costs are and feasibility of both. Matt?
Yeah, Karen, did you say municipal light plant?
Yes, that's the name that the broadband internet access was lumped underneath utilities such as lighting and electrical. So it's called a municipal light plant. It is on, if you want to look it up, it is MGL 164.
Yeah, that I just wanted to make sure I heard it right because it's interesting. I had a correspondence today that talked about the advantages of having a municipal light plant for to being able to purchase wind energy. The state is now looking at allowing those entities to enter into agreements. It seems like we could talk to Lauren, but it may make sense, Lauren Sinatra, it may make sense for us to consider that as we're negotiating with some of these, some of the wind farms, because if we could buy it, we could get set electric prices and save the residents millions of dollars over the next 20 years. It's something that we've pursued, but has not been quite possible. Vineyard Wind wasn't ready for it. The next guys might be. And so, it is, so it may be something we may want to push to the head because of the benefits the town could receive. So I'm glad that I checked on that. In my direction on putting Wi-Fi and internet everywhere is we should be able to go to the beach. We should be able to go somewhere. I'm old, we should be able to go to the beach and not be interrupted. We should go somewhere and have some peace and quiet. It's like putting it out in Yellowstone, there should be some places where we aren't connected. Otherwise, how do you ever have a chance to smell the roses and get a break from the craziness? So I'm not gun ho on some of that. I don't think it's necessary, but.
Great, thank you. And just in closing, I'd like to follow up on Libby's remarks regarding cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a really critical topic that we need to address. And moving forward, we really have to look at what we as a town must implement, must pay attention to in order to protect ourselves, protect our government, and protect our constituents. I've been attending, as many of you know through my emails, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And I've been attending both state and federal summits. I attended a second federal summit today. And the participants in these summits include representatives from Department of Homeland Security, NSA, CISA, which is the security agency, FBI, and what was it? This military branch, cyber response mission force. I offhand, I think I got that wrong, but it sounds kind of like Space Force, but only for cybersecurity. And this is a giant topic. And you'll be hearing more from me about this as time goes on. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you, Karen. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a hand up from Gary Beller. It might be about this. Go to him.
Thanks, Jason. So this is either a question for Karen or perhaps it's a question for the select board as a whole. I noticed that what is not in the strategic plan and something that I wish that you folks would think about is the fact that we've been living with the pandemic for the last year and a half, the result of which is that we've been having all of these meetings through Zoom. And what that has done is allowed much greater participation by members of the public, locals, as well as seasonal folks in the business of the town. But the governor's order, the emergency order, ends in April. And assuming that it does not get, hopefully the pandemic will continue dissipating and it won't have to be renewed, and we'll go back to the old way. But the old way, where everyone is required to be at meetings personally, will mean that a lot of the folks who have been able to participate or at least listen in on the meetings of the various town committees will no longer have access to that. So my question is, could the select board and Karen think about whether making a part of our strategy going forward is to allow continuation of the public to participate through Zoom, even though we'll be back meeting personally after April? That's my question. Thank you.
Gary, we started that hybrid before COVID jumped back up. We actually had in person and this. So I think Karen and her team did a really good job of figuring the hybrid out. We just got started, but I think once we go back, we'll get better and better at it. So we're going to have the best of both worlds soon, Gary.
Great. Thank you.
Erica?
Sorry, I just was going to note that I'm not sure that hybrid's going to be available for every one of our 40 boards, commissions, committees, and workshops. We're very fortunate that we've got NCTV to help us with a lot of these regulatory boards, but we don't have them with the non-regulatory boards. We also, some of those don't have staff members. They're all volunteer. So it's really going to depend on the different committees and what's available for that.
Yep. Thank you, Erica. Anything else here? Matt?
Just, two things. I think when we re-up this, we should be putting coastal resiliency, as a priority in there. We're going to have a plan and there's going to be actions on that. So I think that's going to want to be a focus. And the other one, I sort of mentioned it earlier, I just flush it out now. Everything we've talked about has been impacted by hiring. I think that our number one priority at this point, we should be focusing on hiring and staffing. And that's going to bleed into housing because you can't do it without housing. But I think that, personnel and hiring and how we do it and where we stand and, it might be some tough decisions on what to prioritize within departments, et cetera. I think that hiring should be sort of like we focused on our fiscal situation and have got that well in hand. I would be willing to not have quarterly fiscal reports, but have quarterly hiring reports from the various departments. So when we have these discussions, I'd like to, sort of have that as a topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Can we go to Deanne now? See if that's working.
Thank you, Jason. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. I thank everyone. I would like to comment on the goal of environmental leadership. First of all, I want to just thank the board and the staff for engaging in strategic planning. I remember, Libby, way back when, in my consulting days, when Kim Hort and I had a goal setting workshop with the then select board upstairs at the Pacific Bank. I think you've come a long way, and I can't help but remember Jim Kelly and how much he advocated for a strategic plan. What I'd like to comment about tonight is specifically environmental leadership. Again, I am grateful, as I know many citizens are, that you have identified environmental leadership as one of your goals. However, I think there is a big, huge disconnect between being committed to environmental leadership and two recent developments. One is your announcement that you apparently have entered into an agreement with private property owners on Baxter Road to pursue hard armoring 7% of our otherwise natural shoreline on the eastern side of our island. Coastal planners in coastal communities across the country and around the world understand that hard armoring is harmful to others. And I think as citizens, we don't understand how you can embrace environmental leadership as a goal and then pursue this strategy. And then the second recent development that is even more concerning is your apparent lack of support for our Conservation Commission, which is our one regulatory body charged with protecting and preserving our environment. And it appears that you are at odds with them, and we don't understand that. You have not been discussing this in public. We don't know where it's been discussed. The town manager said this evening it hasn't been discussed in executive session. Then we don't know who is talking about it or where they are talking about it or what they are saying or what information they are receiving. So I would like to respectfully request on behalf of many, many concerned citizens that you have a workshop meeting or some kind of discussion about this whole issue of environmental leadership and specifically how it pertains to your support of hard armoring an eroding headland that is the primary source of sand for so many of our beaches from Great Point around to Tom Nevers and to the South Shore. And you're a parent. I don't know whether it's lack of support, but maybe differences of opinion with our Conservation Commission. We feel that these are really important matters that deserve discussion and involvement of the community.
Thank you, Deanne. Libby, are we at, we have another focus?
There's just a bit more. The quality of life focus area. We, is Kamal on? Sorry, Kamal. Yep, thank you so much. Kamal's going to give a brief update on what's going on here. I mean, you can see what is on the slide, and he has been before you a couple of times fairly recently. So Kamal, just maybe a brief a bit about the ongoing activities, because I think you've talked previously about some of the completed ones, and maybe a brief update about our meeting today with the DEI consultants.
Sure, and thanks again for having me aboard and everyone. As far as ongoing activities, the DEI community outreach is just an ongoing responsibility of the DEI office, whether that is reaching out to nonprofits or businesses on things that are specifically DEI related. And a branch of that is some of the two projects that I've already mentioned and that are listed on the slide. The According to Amy project, which takes a look at Nantucket's history through Amy Janess's book, On This Day in Nantucket History, or from a DEI lens, just highlighting the parts of our history that should be spotlighted a little bit more, as well as Meet, which is just a monthly article on the town employees and their stories about just their work and so forth. As for the next slide and the activities that are not yet started, just today, myself, Melissa, Libby, as well as Esmeralda Martinez, Amanda Perry, Janet Schulte, and Roberto Santamaria all met with Tangible Development to discuss the strategic plan for the DEI office. We discussed both short-term goals, which is phase 1 pretty much, and the assessment that will be taking place soon, as well as just the long-term goal, the fact that the strategic plan itself is going to be a total of 18 months and the different components that we're hoping to make sure that that's in that plan. So unless there's specific questions, there's not much else to share from the slides themselves.
Any questions for Kamal? There we go. I can see everybody. Comments? Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kamal. I won't spend too much time on, Erica, the very last goal, evaluating partnership opportunities that promote active and healthy living. We do have a few things that we've been working on. They're shown here. And another thing that the Park and Rec Commission has been talking about is, I'm probably not going to get this totally right, but a kind of a park partners sort of a program with stakeholders who use the recreational facilities of the town to get them to be, good stewards of the property, most of whom are, but sometimes there are rogue uses of some of these places, and we really need to get that a bit under control. We are in the process of advertising for a Parks and Rec director, manager type of position, and we are going to be seeking some additional resources in the Park and Rec area to help with some of this rogue stuff that I talked about, and also the directors will need a vehicle and some other types of equipment. The only other thing that the board talked about when you were having a discussion about the Town Government Study Committee report was, I thought that I heard some discussion about bringing into the strategic plan discussion the development of the special commission to look at potentially changing the form of government from open town meeting to representative. And that may be something you want to put on a future agenda given the hour.
Yes, I think so, Libby. I saw some head shaking, and I think it was we wanted to talk about it more last time, but it was a long meeting, and I think that there's leadership needed from this board to start that process a little further. So I think putting it on a future agenda sooner rather than later would be good. Thumbs up from Melissa. Okay. That also could follow under efficient town operations too, Libby. That could go under all of that, and sustainability, and kind of umbrella it all.
Quality of life.
What's that, Melissa?
Quality of life.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else? Was that it, Libby? Okay. Was there any comments from the board at all? Anything regarding strategic plan? We still have all the town staff here. Thank you for all being here so late.
I should just mention, I very inappropriately forgot to recognize David Gray, sewer director. He was going to give a little bit of an update on some of the sewer projects, but I had let him go because the poor guy waited, and then I passed right over him. But we do hear from David fairly regularly, and I think you have a pretty good idea. So if we do want an update on some of the sewer projects which relate to the water quality goal, we can always bring him back. Sorry, David.
Melissa?
Thanks, Jason. No questions, just a comment. Thank you to all the staff. This was a really great review, and I agree with Deanne's comment that it's really lovely to have a strategic plan to help us focus these conversations and think about future planning and weigh those against steps we're taking to meet those goals. So I really appreciated tonight. I know it's a long meeting for everyone, so thanks for hanging in. It was a great update.
Thank you, Melissa. Matt?
And I think I may have been in that Deanne's when Deanne oversaw our meeting, back in the day. I think it was myself and Finn, it might have been Tim Savarino and Finn Murphy. I think I was there. So it's just, I'm showing my age. And I made my comments earlier, my ending comments. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's it. Thank you, everyone. Is there any committee reports? No. Okay, no committee reports. We're gonna move on to the public hearing to consider the appeal of Rich Gillis, 38 Prospect Street, LLC of HEC disapproval of certificate of appropriateness and for a SPAL for property located at 38 Prospect Street. And just to kind of thank you for putting that up there, Erica. So I'll open a public hearing. That's number one. And the appellant will start. The HTC will be able to give their position. Usually we do a round or two of rebuttals. Once I start hearing the same things being repeated, I will stop you, and then we can take some public comment from the public, raising the digital hand, and then once we go through that, then we'll close the public hearing and make a decision. And just as everybody mostly knows, or probably everyone knows for this, is we're not here to put our judgment in for the HTC. It is to decide if their decision making was sound, if it was arbitrary or capricious. And so this is a public hearing. I'm going to try to keep the initial, like the appellant HTC, to 5 minutes, so we can give more time for the rebuttals. Okay, I think Rich, you'd be up first.
Oh, I'm starting, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you are, Linda. And who are you with?
I'm with Mr. Gillis.
And this is Linda Williams, just for people who are listening on the radio.
Yeah, who don't recognize my teenage voice, but teenage son's voice. But I'm going to start. I believe Steve Cohen, who's also here, and Rich is on the feed as well. Steve wants to go after all the area neighbors have their comments. He wants to follow up with them. So as opposed to rebuttal, he just wants me go, have them go, and then he'll go after them.
So who's speaking first? So you and whoever has 5 minutes. So you can split it up however you like.
Okay. It's a new subdivision. It's the last lot in the ROH OHD up on Prospect. It's all that area up there by the Muellers at the head of North Mill Street is all being subdivided now. These are 2 times the size of the lots in the neighborhood. They are not 5,000 square foot lots, though they could have been. They are actually close to 10,000 square foot lots. So they're twice the size of everybody else in the neighborhood. You're going to hear comments about it's a pool, it's a mini pool. It doesn't matter how many times the neighbors say it. It is not a pool or a mini pool under the bylaw. It is a spa, which is allowed in the OHD and the ROH. There is a house on the lot. If you looked at your packet, you could see the site plan. There's a house on the lot and a secondary structure on the lot. The secondary structure blocks the spa from the Prospect Street completely. The grade changes dramatically from Prospect Street also. The primary view of the house and the secondary dwelling is from North Mill Street, which is a dirt road. I believe it's one way going in. The house and the second dwelling and the second structure were approved by the HDC. The hardscape is always a separate application. They came in with a hardscape with a driveway of the walkways, things like that. And the HDC rightly expressed concerns about visibility of some aspects of this proposition. We went back to the drawing board and did what they asked us to do. They asked us to provide a section of the wall so they could see the decreasing height of the wall as the grade changed. We took the raised spa and made it flush. We took out a lot of the bluestone. We changed this privet screening, which doesn't do much for anybody for 9 months of the year, and put in natural vegetation that would be there year round. We're willing to put in a fence. We didn't get a chance to do that. The visibility would have been eliminated, and the usual condition on all of the HDC applications, when they do approve spas, which they've done all over the ROH OHD, because I've been party to several of them, is put in a condition that it's not visible at the time of inspection, and it's in perpetuity, which means that the visual block has to be maintained. If it's not, then they can be cited and fined. That's what we were willing to do. We came back and did what they asked. And then almost the entire conversation, the first and the second time, was on use as a spa. The HDC has no jurisdiction over use. It is considered a landscape hardscape feature, not a pool or a mini pool. It is a legal spa, which is under 150 square feet. And all the conversation was about how much everybody thought a spa was inappropriate, how everybody thought it didn't matter if it wasn't visible, it was inappropriate. It got off the rails. We couldn't come to an agreement or an understanding, and the chairman said that we should take it to a higher power, quote unquote, which is you guys. So it was denied, knowing that we are all coming here on the appeal to, I don't know, get some guidance from the HDC, because the spas are allowed, so it's not going to be visible. So I'm not exactly sure where we're supposed to go with that. But we were very concerned about the use. Many of the people you're going to hear speak next are 500 to 600 feet away. There's questionable legal standing. They are not aggrieved by the spa because they cannot see it, nor do they live next door to it. It doesn't matter if it's next to the pony farm, the oldest house, or the land bank property. It is not visible, and that's where the jurisdiction of the HDC ends. But we did address their concerns when we came back with it. And we all agreed that maybe it should go to the selectmen, but I'm not exactly sure what the resolution is going to be. Either overturn them because they were arbitrary and capricious, because as I said, spas have been approved. I got 2 approved, I think that meeting or week before, in the old historic district, closer to the middle of the old historic district. So it's the arbitrary and capricious that sort of speaks for itself. And I don't know, we got a hold of that letter from their attorney, which was not sent to us, from this group calling themselves the Mill Street Area Neighborhood, which I don't know who they are. I can conjecture, but we never got a hold of that letter. It was not sent to us to address it, but I believe Steve Cohen has a copy of it now and he will address it at the end. But it was arbitrary and capricious to deny it based on the fact that it is a quote unquote spa, not because it was not visible or the lack of visibility of this particular spa. And it will be invisible to the publicly traveled way of North Mill Street, and certainly not visible because it's blocked completely by the other structure from Prospect.
Thank you, Linda. Is there
for you to overturn the HDC at the best, or remand it and order them to issue it, or we'll put the fence in and that should eliminate the entire discussion. But right now it's not visible because it is at grade and it's no longer raised and it's blocked by foliage. And
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. It's been, so I gave you 7 minutes. Is anybody else from the appellant like to speak before we go to the?
Mr. Chairman, Stephen Cohen, I would like to reserve my arguments till the end. I'd like to let the HDC and all of the members of the public go first so that I could respond comprehensively instead of numerous rebuttals, if that's acceptable.
Sure. So are we ready to go to the HDC?
I'm ready for you when you're ready for me, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'm just making sure Linda, Rich, Steve, they've made their first round. Okay, go ahead, Kadeem.
Right, well, good evening. Kadeem McCarthy here, HDC Compliance Coordinator on behalf of the HDC. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Williams on her accurate description of really what happened with this application and the application at the meetings. If you could excuse me for a minute, I just want to read off some specifics so that you guys are aware. Most of this was in my memo, which was sent out to you. This application was brought to us on May 11th. The application was for a 10 by 10 spa, sinking into a lowered patio with a natural weather gate, a shell and cobblestone apron, and a 24-inch Pennsylvania fieldstone wall. And this is at the property at 38 Prospect Street, lot 29. Throughout this review process, there were members of the public that were very vocal with their concerns about the visibility of the spa and about setting precedent for more spa approvals in the OHD. As with all public concerns, these were brought to the attention of the HDC for their consideration and were also sent to the applicant's agent. The board members voting on this application were Chairman Ray Pohl, Abigail Camp, Diane Coombs, John McLaughlin, and Stephen Welch.
And their main concerns at both meetings were the visibility of the spa and the overall appropriateness of spas in the old historic district. At the time of voting on August 3rd, all 5 board members voted to deny the approval of the spa and the hardscape. And I quote, "It was based upon questions of visibility and questions of appropriateness of character in this setting." Mr. Chairman, as you and the fellow board members are well aware, I'm sure, pools, spas, water features, and the like have all become a real hot button topic at HTC meetings. Over the last 3 years, pools, spas, water features, whatever you guys would like to call them, we've had a real increase of them. In 2019, we approved 109. In 2020, we approved, 130. And just this year so far, we've approved 135. For all of those proposals that come in, we get at least 1 to 2 letters of concern. These concerns typically have to do with visibility from a private property, noise, lighting, and construction timing, all things that are not under the HCC's jurisdiction, but we do still allow the public to voice their concerns and comments at the meetings. Really, the most applicable section of the HCC Act for this specific application that I want to bring forth is Section 9C. The Historic District Commission shall not consider interior arrangement or building features not subject to public view. The commission shall not make any recommendations or requirements except for the purpose of preventing developments incongruous to historic aspects of the surroundings and the historic Nantucket district. So that section there, for me at least, both supports and negates the HCC's decision. And we are in a tough situation here with pools and spas coming forward to the board constantly, and with the amount of concerns that's coming forward as well from the public. As Ms. Williams said, with this application, I do think it was the board's decision that, based upon all the feedback we got and the uncertainty of visibility and appropriateness and use and such, we should come to a higher power and really have you guys, share your strong opinions and give us some counsel on how we should move forward with matters like this in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kadeem. Mr. Pohl, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'd like to say a few things. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I think everyone that sat on this application, and certainly anyone that sat on any of these applications, are really being pulled in a lot of different directions. As people that live on Nantucket, we're citizens that are concerned about the proliferation of pools and, as we say in the old historic districts, water features. By the way, the definition of a pool is any body of water that is over 1,000 cubic feet of water. Anything less than that is not considered a pool. So that allows for a fairly large water body that by most people's reckoning would be considered a pool. Anyway, so we were very sensitive to the concerns of the neighbors, particularly in this neighborhood. The context is historic. It's a beautiful sort of virgin piece of property. We were concerned when it was subdivided, and we're even more concerned about the fact that it's being developed, and we're even more concerned about the fact that now it would seem everyone who's developing their property wants to have a quote unquote water feature. So there's that. But then there is also, as Kadeem read, there's the HCC's charter, which is essentially that we're really only empowered to opine on anything that is visible, not heard, anything that is visible from a publicly traveled way, not a neighbor's piece of property. Lighting at night. Noise from kids, doing dives into the pool, et cetera, those are really not our concern. And what unfortunately has taken place is I think that there's a sort of a broad definition in the eyes of the public about what the HDC actually has power over. And so we've become I think the regulatory board of last resort, if there's no other way to, have their voice heard. So a lot of people will appear at the HEC and say, oh, well, the creation of this house is going to create drainage issues on my piece of property. The creation of this house is going to create more traffic on our street. The creation of this house is going to mean more noise for me in the summertime. Those things are not germane to the HTC. So I strongly felt, and some of the other board members felt, like this was such a hot button issue, to use Kadim's word. It needed to go to a higher power, because I think that whether it's you or whether it's Superior Court, somebody needs to say, hey, everybody, the HDC is allowed to do this. We can vote on this and we can approve or disapprove based on this. But beyond that, it's not really our purview. So I feel for all the neighbors. Gosh, I would hate to have a pool or a quote unquote water feature going next to my house. So I think, we have enough of these that have come through that it really demanded to go to a higher board. And that's why this appeal is before you right now. So that's what I have to say. And I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
So we've heard from the appellant, we've heard from the HTC. Is there any rebuttal from Linda, Rich, Steve?
Just one question before Steve goes, after they go. We were sensitive to the neighbors. There's a tremendous amount of planting up there. Almost all of the people on Mill Street are 500 to 600 feet away. They are not neighbors. They don't appear to have any legal standing under the law. Steve will go into that, but they're not neighbors. They are neighborhood, but not abutters. Not one of them is an abutter. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Linda.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I would like to go last, and I would yield to the public just to avoid the back and forth of me then having to respond to everything that's said. I'd rather just do it once.
Got it. Anything from the board before I go to the public? Okay, so a reminder, Brian Riley from KP Law is here as counsel. If you have any questions. Can we go to the public? We have Hillary Rayport up first.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I'm Hillary Hedges Rayport. I chair the Nantucket Historical Commission. The Historical Commission is the preservation planning municipal body. We advocate for preservation. This particular neighborhood is a neighborhood I hope that the select board is aware is a particular historic interest. And it's also a cultural landscape with open space and a unique history. So it's of a high level of interest to the Historical Commission and also of the community. The work of the HDC is also of a high level of interest to the Historical Commission and to the select board and to the community in general. If we did not have the HDC determining and making determinations on appropriateness, we would have a very, very different island. So that being said, I have to say I'm really surprised that we are having a discussion on whether or not spas are appropriate in the old historic district in front of the select board right now associated with this application. This is a really important question. It's a question for the planning board. Currently, there is zoning that allows spas in the old historic district. So I think it's important for this group to understand that the issue is the visual design of this property, what is visible And that is what the HDC is making its determination based on. And that's what the comments in the minutes that were supplied is based on. What could be perhaps described as a plaintive cry for help from the HDC. This is what happens when zoning is misaligned with what is currently existing in neighborhoods and what people want to have in their neighborhoods. And because we have a historic district commission, these inappropriate zoning, or I shouldn't say inappropriate, I'll say.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, what does this have to do with the case? We're debating public policy here. It's entirely inappropriate. Entirely inappropriate.
Stephen, sorry, that's my call. Stephen, it's my call.
I'm shocked
Hillary, go
to
ahead.
shocked to be interrupted.
Well,
So,
please stick to the case.
Excuse me, no. Hillary, go ahead. Thank you, Stephen. Hillary, I'm sure you were getting ready to wrap up in a couple.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it falls to the HDC to override zoning. Now, regarding the visibility, this is not just about this spa. This is about the entire landscape plan. The HDC has commented on the shell driveway. It has commented on the center driveway. It has commented on the bluestone. It is commented on the fact that plants are not a reliable and controllable screen for what is inappropriate to be seen from a public way. All of these things were commented on. And the reason why this landscape design was denied in its entirety is not because there is a pool. It's because the entire plan is inappropriate. Now, this is a beautiful plan. It might be gorgeous on Wynn Street. It might be something you'd see on Hedgesbury Lane. It is not appropriate in this particular location. The HDC deliberated this. They considered all of the visible aspects. They considered whether or not the proposed plants were reliable to hide the inappropriate aspects from view. And they determined that it was not. So while I do hope that, the call for help, the issue about the zoning is addressed, and I'm sure that it will be addressed in the correct forum, right now, this select board is being asked to determine whether or not the landscape plan that was denied by this board, this HDC, which considered it in detail, was carefully considered, and if there was grounds for denial. And I will say that there is nothing that looks anything like this in this very important, very historic neighborhood. And I would ask this board to please respect the wisdom and the decision of the HDC and uphold their denial. Thank you.
Hillary. You go to the next public comment. Ann Davis.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. My name's Ann Lingaman Davis, and I live at 15 Mill Street. I have a Master's of Science degree in Historic Preservation from the University of Pennsylvania. Professionally, I have been the chair of the Dunstable Historical Commission for 11 years. I have a good understanding of the common objectives shared by most Massachusetts historical commissions and local historic districts. I attended and voiced my opposition to the proposed spa pool at both the June 15th and August 3rd meetings. My points made at those meetings still stand, and I support the HDC's denial. The proposed spa pool is in close proximity to a historically significant public landscape. The NHA's Eleanor Ham Ponyfield and the land bank lots have been preserved through dedication and generosity of public and private donors. The area enjoyed by many of us is celebrated and an important jewel of the old historic district. Secondly, the proposed dense suburban shrubbery screening, which it may be reliable or not, to tuck away a spa pool is totally incompatible with the open and rural character of this historic neighborhood. Finally, spa pools reshape the whole perceived setting. They are impactful. A spa pool in this neighborhood would deeply change a visitor's sense of place and understanding of this historically rich contextual landscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Really quick for anybody else, Brian Riley, can you just remind us, this happens every time we have an HTC appeal, what is the select board deciding, right? Because it's very easy to get into zoning and do we like pools and what are we just reframe it for us.
All right, well, I will try to do that, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, you know, the board, the HDC is the one that makes findings and decides based on the special act whether whether the issue at hand is visible from a public way or some other street or other area that's defined there. And then it does, it says it pass on the appropriateness of the proposed feature. You know, that's not really a defined term, but, you know, certainly they look at how, quote, appropriate it is in this area of the historic district. And when it comes to the select board, you know, your role, even though it almost seems like this is what you're being asked to do, or at least to kind of weigh in with your thoughts, is not to say, well, you said it was not appropriate, we think it is appropriate. You know, you look at their decision, whether it's in the certificate of appropriateness itself or the memo or the minutes, and decide whether the well, I'll have to use the word, whether the appropriate you know, aspects of what the HDC looks at were correct. You know, is it, at least in their determination, is it visible from a public way? And have they stated whether there's aspects that are simply not appropriate for the area? And so the select board decides either, yes, we're going to approve the HDC's decision. You could say that it's you disapprove it and find that it was arbitrary and capricious, that it just wasn't enough there to defend their decision, which was to deny the application. Or the board could basically find that you think it was arbitrary and remanded back to the HDC for further hearing to at least perhaps flesh out what they based their denial on a little more, and you know, just make it more clear that the things that they looked at were within their jurisdiction. So I hope it helps. You know, the important thing is not to say, well, in our opinion, this application was appropriate. You know, the HDC has that decision. They're okay, it's good enough, or if not, you could send it back and ask them for further term.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I think we'll go to one more public, and then we'll go over to you, Mr. Cohen. Can we let in Ann Dewez? And the longer everybody talks, the less people I'm going to be able to get to in the public. So try to make it short. If I hear things that have been repeated, I might have to stop you. So we'll go Ann, and then we have Wayne, and then we'll go over to Mr. Cohen. Ann, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Go ahead.
My name is Ann Duez, and I live at 5 Mill Street. Since the formation of our neighborhood group in 2016, when we came together to partially fund the purchase of the land around and across from the Ham Pony Field on Mill Street, which is now in conservation, I have acted as the group's representative. To answer Ms. Williams' question about who this group is, it includes virtually all of the 28 residences on the 5 streets that define our neighborhood: Angola, Candle House, Mill, North Mill, and New Dollar Lane. And all of the 5 abutters subdivisions live on adjacent streets, including 14 other near neighbors with a vested interest in the neighborhood. Our group thus totals 47 families. This group, many of whom have joined this meeting, fully supports the effort to retain the unique historical and natural context of our neighborhood that the presence of spas and more broadly speaking, as Hillary said, the whole landscape plan would destroy through visibility and or screening structures, hardscape, earth moving, and vegetation that are not appropriate in this historical and natural context. We think the HDC's decision to deny the spa was fair and reasoned, and we support it unequivocally. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ann. Go to Wayne Dennison.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Wayne Dennison, I am an attorney with the law firm of Brown Rudnick in Boston. I have had the great privilege from time to time to actually work on Nantucket, and I have been retained by a number of the Mill Street area neighborhood residents to weigh in on this application. And that my input here is actually very, very narrow, quite frankly, because I think the analysis that the select board needs to make is very narrow. You have a 5-0 unanimous decision of the HDC. The HDC determined that they were going to deny it due to questions of visibility and appropriateness with respect to character and setting. There is evidence in the record, Ms. Bellman of 17 Mill Street, this is visible from Prospect and Mill Street and North Mill Street. Commissioner Camp doesn't support the spa because it isn't sufficiently screened and will be visible in the winter. Commissioner Pohl agrees walling off with privet is not keeping with the area. Mr. Miklos at the subsequent public hearing, who is an architect on Nantucket, the spa will be visible from Prospect Street. Hedges are not adequate to hide the spa due to topography. Ms. Duis, who we just heard, spas and pools are not appropriate given the special nature of this neighborhood. Hedges necessary to hide the pool are in direct opposition to the open nature of this historic neighborhood. Commissioner Camp, we are relying on vegetation for screening, which might or might not survive. Commissioner Coombs agrees with Ms. Camp, the vegetation to screen this doesn't fit in the neighborhood. And Commissioner McLaughlin, according to the photos from a traveled away, this will be highly visible. That is the record before this select board. And this select board has the benefit of multiple cases in the appeals courts of Massachusetts, both in the SJC and in the appeals court, the Gumley case and the Montgomery case, that makes it clear that the HDC has the discretion with respect to the appropriateness of these issues and the congruity to historical aspects of the surroundings, and that this board's review is limited to whether that is an unreasonable decision, whether it's an arbitrary decision, and whether it's a capricious decision. Given the factual presentation made at the 2 public hearings, there is no basis upon which anyone could determine that this was arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable. And that is quite frankly the legal argument here. Ms. Williams raises this notion of legal standing a couple of different times. The legal standing issue only comes into play if we end up in Superior Court. And then there will be a test of legal standing And quite frankly, if you look at the Montgomery case that was brought against this board and decided in 2019, the breadth of legal standing with respect to HDC decisions is pretty broad. But I do not want to belabor this issue. You folks have a very narrow issue in front of you, and you have a 5-0 decision with factual support in the record for everything that the HDC ultimately concluded. And in all candor, I think that ends the inquiry.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Cohen?
Mr. Chairman, can I make a correction before Steve
No,
starts?
I'm sorry. No, we're going to Mr. Cohen. That's okay.
All right. There's some things that were portrayed by Hillary Rayport that are incorrect.
Yep. I
And,
want to go back and forth with everybody. Can we go to Mr. Cohen?
This attorney mentioned what happened earlier, and we changed all the stuff that they had concerns with.
So I'd like to thank the board for its time, and I'd like to thank the neighbors for their interest in preserving the historic nature of the neighborhood. And I would like to thank the staff for the diligent job that they're doing. And again, especially the chair who puts in, probably on hundreds of hours of volunteer time on this. The issue that we have here is that almost everything that was said is mostly true, and almost everything that was said is mostly irrelevant, and almost everything that was said actually supports my client's case. And what I mean by that is that the HDC essentially has authority to approve all exterior architectural features of every structure, including hardscaping on Nantucket. No one's debating that. There are a very few exceptions to that. Interior and not visible from away. And what makes things arbitrary and capricious is when the HDC acts outside its jurisdiction. And the only thing that's before you tonight is not whether or not you like pools and spas, and not whether or not this neighborhood should be protected or not protected or anything like that, or not whether, zoning is irrelevant here. The question is the spa visible and therefore within the HDC's jurisdiction or not? And secondarily, do they have a other legal basis for it? And it is very, very clear that an at-grade pool with or spa within a patio is not visible from the way. This spa is blocked from the road by 2 buildings and evergreen plantings and a gate. It is impossible to see it. And if it is possible to see it, the applicant has the right to, be told you need to beef it up a little bit. And anyone who says that the HDC has the right to stop things that can't be seen does not know what they're talking about. You can make all these arguments you want about the neighborhood and the feelings of the neighborhood and whatever. They don't mean anything. It's not what's the question here. The only question here is jurisdiction through visibility. Now, the second thing that you need to look at is whether or not the HDC is being arbitrary and capricious because it's treating this client differently. And if you were to review the HDC's files, what you would find is the HDC regularly approves pools and spas in every neighborhood on Nantucket, including the old historic district, including the most rural neighborhoods in Dionis or wherever. And in every single case, the HDC has the same requirement, which is that the pool be not visible or the spa be not visible at inspection and perpetually thereafter. And that is what it should do. It's done that, dozens and dozens of times, including in the old historic district, including in the most rural districts. Now, the HDC, to its credit, has different standards for how it enforces that. If you go to Dionis, the HDC would tell you, we want you to use grade changes that are meandering and that will create a rural appearance in nature. If you go to Sconset, you would be requested to have a fence or a hedge that's more formal in nature. And in town, you have different variations. Every neighborhood has its own variety of how you hide a pool or whatever you're trying to hide. The HDC regularly approves air conditioning units, skylights, solar, all kinds of things that are not historically appropriate. But in more historically sensitive areas, those are hidden in fencing, they're hidden in fake roof walks, they're hidden all kinds of different ways. I'm sitting on Main Street right now, and I can see, that there's about a dozen roof walks that are really air conditioning units and restaurant vents, from my office. So the idea of whether it's historic and existed is not what's important. The idea is whether it's visible and whether the HDC is being consistent. And I would argue, and in fact insist, that it is 100% not a visible feature when you have an at-grade 10 by 10 spa that is blocked by a hedge and a fence and 2 buildings. And I would argue that the HDC is being entirely inconsistent with its own policies and its own actions in every other application that it's seen, including applications near the oldest house and other, sensitive areas. So I think this board has only one decision to make, which is to tell the HDC that it has acted outside of its jurisdiction, and thank the HDC for bringing the case to the board so that the board can remind it that it needs to make decisions within its jurisdiction. It's not up to the board or the HDC to decide should we be approving pools in the old historic district or not. That's a political question. You can't make a political question into a legal question. If someone wants to ban pools, which we've done, or wants to limit pools, which we've done, you can do that through zoning. I would remind this board that everything that I'm saying to you is essentially echoing the advice of town council at KP Law when we had this exact issue during the case where someone put a pool directly behind St. Paul's Church, I think about 8 to 10 years ago, which is what started all of this ruckus about pools in the first place. And it was the advice of town council that the HDC does not have the authority or jurisdiction to ban pools, and therefore that if it was not visible, it had to be approved. And that is what led to the zoning changes that we have now for the old historic district. So I would echo the advice you've been given 10 years ago or whenever it was, that this has already been decided. If my client wants to come in and have a pool and everybody in the neighborhood thinks that these tacky nouveau riche are ruining Nantucket, that's not an HDC question. Okay, they can take it or leave it, but it's not there. It's not a popularity contest. It's a legal question, and the HDC does not have that jurisdiction.
Thank you.
I thank you again for your time, and I'll wrap it with that.
Thank you. So if the board members are okay, I'd like to go to Wayne Dennison, their attorney, just because, just to even out a little bit, if that's okay. Or the board can say, I think I've heard enough. I'd like to close the public hearing. Ready to close the public hearing?
No, I'm saying if you want to go to Mr. Dennison, I'm fine with that.
Go to Mr. Dennison, and can you make this brief, Mr. Dennison? It's your second go around. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to make it incredibly brief because under your own rules, you're not permitted to consider additional evidence that the HDC did not consider. So that the notion that there are dozens of roof walks somewhere near Mr. Cohen has nothing to do with his case. That's something that happened 10 years ago and you were advised on, resolved in a particular way, was not in front of the HDC, and therefore pursuant to your rules is not in front of you. You get to look at what the HDC looked at. And that's what our argument has been exclusively limited to. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a legal
Mr.
question.
Cohen, hold on a second. I didn't call on you. Sorry. I hate to do that, but I need to be careful here.
Sure.
I just don't want people going back and forth.
That's fine. I agree with Mr. Dennison that you're not supposed to be considering facts that weren't presented, but your legal decisions and legal questions are a different issue. And I would suggest that in the same way that he's bringing up quotes from the Gumley case, it's the same thing. Me telling you what the process that the HDC has done and me telling you what the legal standard is not bringing in new facts.
Right. I think we get it. Thank you. I think we get it. I think most of us have done a lot of appeals before. We know new evidence is not supposed to be brought in, but it's also a public hearing and we have to hear people speak. And so some things are brought in that HDC didn't consider. We understand that. Board, are we okay to, do you want to ask Brian Riley any questions? Do you want to close the public hearing? And make a decision. Looking to my board for some guidance here, what they're ready to do. We can also discuss among ourselves. We can do it. We can close the public hearing, then discuss. But once we close the public hearing, can't bring anybody else in. Matt, did you start to raise your hand? I didn't see it.
I'm ready to make a decision. The standard here is pretty hard to overturn the HDC, and so I'm ready to make a decision. I think.
Okay, Matt's ready. Anybody else? Any questions for council? Brian Riley, if we close the public hearing, Eric, you might be able to answer this too. Can we still ask town council questions?
Yes, in my opinion, you can. It's just you can't hear from any other,
Correct.
any other parties, any other evidence. But yes, you can certainly ask me questions.
Okay, great. Okay, I think, thank you, everyone. We're going to close the public hearing and the board can discuss, or if there's a motion.
Well, I'll discuss and make a motion. I think there's a high bar for us to overturn the HDC. Sometimes I have to make choices with the HDC that I have to support them in choices I don't like. But in this case, I think we should uphold the HDC. They have broad powers over place and setting, and I was on earlier HDC in the old days. They didn't allow planting to cover things. That's been a relatively newish, a relatively new phenomenon, and new as in 30 years ago, 25 years ago when I first was around. That wasn't really appropriate. That has changed, and so. And that isn't what we're dealing with now anyhow. So basically what I'm saying, it was a 5-0 vote. I don't think they were arbitrary and capricious. I don't believe we can overturn them. So I'll make a motion to support the HDC.
Is there a second?
And can we clarify, support the HDC and deny the appeal?
Yes, you make me sound smarter, Erica. Thank you.
I have a hard time seconding the, did you second it, Christy?
I said I'll second for discussion.
Okay.
I know that Dawn had her hand up. I wanted to hear from a few more members.
Yeah, I wasn't quite ready yet, but yeah, great.
Okay, go ahead, whoever, Dawn or Melissa.
I'm struggling with this a little bit. I've always been very supportive of the HDC, but the way Ray presented it tonight, it seems like it's about a bigger issue than visible exterior architectural features. And common practice amongst the HDC for at least a decade has been, if it's not visible, regardless of what the landscape feature is, and it is agreed to be not visible in perpetuity, that's been the standard. So I'm just I'm a bit puzzled by this decision. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but it feels a bit arbitrary to me, and I feel like it's something that maybe needs to be addressed through other venues like zoning. The concerns that are maybe possibly really underlying.
Thank you, Dawn. Anybody else? Melissa?
Thank you. And thank you, Dawn. I also feel like I would, with a 5-0 vote, not have a difficult time supporting the HDC's decision, but I also feel like they brought this to us because they feel like they need more clarity or more guidance, and we're not the board or commission to give that to them. So it does feel arbitrary to me, and curious to me that it's in front of us, and with a remand, I guess, does that mean that it can be further discussed or debated or clarified within the HDC, or do they not feel like they have the ability to make these decisions. I mean, I agree with John that it seems that if you can't see the structure from the road, and if it's not visible, I'm not sure what we're talking about, and why it's in front of us. So I continue to feel a little bit perplexed, and I wasn't totally ready for a motion yet because I did want to hear some more conversation from board members on if anyone else was feeling slightly perplexed as I am.
Christine? Sorry, Christine, I'll go to you back.
Thanks. A question for Brian, if possible. So if we uphold the denial, will it go to Superior Court? And is that something that would give more guidance in kind of what the HDC is looking for on this?
Well, it could. I mean, that would give the the property owner or the other proponent, excuse me, proponents grounds to appeal this board's decision to the Superior Court. And I mean, I personally haven't been part of one of those appeals for an HDC decision, but I think that that's where the same arguments you heard from both sides tonight would be fleshed out in front of a judge. And, there, which could lead to some, weighing in from the court on, how appropriateness gets measured, or how, how visible from a public way gets interpreted as well. It seemed as though the HDC felt that it was visible from a public way, which at least gave them their initial jurisdiction. But yeah, that's certainly possible. You never quite know what a judge is going to come back with, but these things could well get fleshed out and get something back from the court that could assist in the future.
Thank you, Brian. Matt?
Yeah, the HDC said it is visible. Superior Court will sort this out. A remand will not solve this. A remand will, they're at odds. It's not going to change. I think we want the town boards. We want to be on the same side as the HDC. We don't want to be adversarial to them. We made that mistake over on Lily Street, and it was a mess, both ways. And the applicant can always make changes and reapply. If they don't want to take it to court, they can make changes and reapply. So so those are my key points.
Any other discussion? Oh, there's a vote on the floor. Are we ready for the vote? Kind of seems like we're ready, kind of like maybe we're not ready.
Can we repeat the motion, Jason and/or Erica, please?
Sure. The motion is to deny the appeal and uphold the HTC. And if I may, regarding your question about does it go to Superior Court, that is up to the appellant. It's not an automatic.
So if you vote yes in this vote, you are upholding the HGC decision. Okay, ready to vote? Okay. All those in favor, Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Don Holgate?
No.
Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. So HGC appeal is, our decision is upheld.
We will be back with another appeal. I just don't want you to think this is over.
Erica, is there anything else you need, or Brian, you need anything else from us?
No, we'll be issuing a letter noting the board's vote, and we'll be filing it with the town clerk. If not tomorrow, then on Monday.
Okay, thank you.
That sounds fine.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, last item, citizen department request, Toscana Request for continuation of waiver of town noise bylaw to offload barges at Steamship Authority Wharf between 4:30 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. And Erica, have you been dealing with this? Is this?
I mean, a little bit. We invited representative from Toscana to be at the meeting. They're not here. At your last meeting, about a month ago, you did approve a waiver through the end of this week, I believe, for 2 times. Sorry.
So
Stephen, there you go. Thank you.
Let me just pull up the minutes real quick. So at your last meeting, you approved a waiver from 4:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. only through October 15th, which is Friday, with a review by the board at the next meeting after October 15th. And they were limited to the number of times to no more than 4 and none on the weekends through October 15th. I will note that we did receive a late email from Sibley Little family in opposition to this. So the pleasure is yours. So they've basically made another request to do it 2 more times within the next month, on October 21st and November 6th.
Which is a weekend date, right, Erica? November 6th?
November 6th is a Saturday, yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Ken Gullickson just raised his hand, but then put it down. I'm not sure if he's representing someone.
Yeah, what's the board think? Before I give my thoughts. Christy?
Thank you. I personally don't like the idea of a Saturday time. The other one I'm okay with, but I think that that's a little bit too early on a weekend.
Thank you, Christy. Matt?
Yeah, we did receive an email a few days ago, Steamship Authority, I think and they were talking about how it was going to take a while to sort this. It sounded like so I'd like, if Erica has the details, I'd like an update for the record on that. But I think, anyway, I think I was hoping that'd be a sort of a solution sooner to this than 1.5 years or 2 years. Is there any chance that there will be, Erica?
Let me review the timeline that was provided by the Steamship Authority, if I may. And it was an estimated timeline from the engineering firm that the Steamship Authority tasked to the project. Obtaining approval of sampling plan from the Army Corps of Engineering and Mass DEP would be November 2021. Sediment sampling and testing December 2021. Prepare Army Corps, DEP, and Nantucket permit applications December 21, January 22. Submit permit applications February 22. Agency reviews February through October of 22. Bid documents October to November 22. So it's at least a year out. And according to Bob Davis, the engineers have indicated that the application review time has grown significantly in the past 1 to 2 years, in particular for the Army Corps. He did note that he spoke with Shane Corey at Toscana, and the Steamship Authority is attempting to have a call with AGM early next week about AGM's ability to assist in performing a reclaim for Toscana, since the Toscana equipment cannot reach the materials which have fallen off of its barges in the berthing area. So that's something that they're working out together. And there was something else I was going to say, and I can't remember what it was.
So, yeah, so thank you, Erica. That's what I'm saying. It's 1.5 years, and potentially longer, 1.5 years, potentially longer. I think the reclaim is great if that can happen, in the near term, which would put this, take this off our, take this problem away. And so, if Christy, if you're making a motion for the 1 day and we keep the pressure on both parties to get the reclaim underway, that would be the most preferable option to me.
Oh, I remembered what I was going to say if I could. I did check with Chief Pittman on the 2 dates that had already happened to see if there were any noise complaints, and there were not. So no issues reported to the police department.
Okay, we go to Mr. Gullickson.
Good evening. Hi, Kenneth Gullickson for Bob Little and Betsy Sibley. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good, thanks. Okay. I just want to point out a couple of things. One, this isn't really an emergency situation. This is the operation of their business. And it looks like they're planning on coming back every month, which this could become business as usual for them to be doing this, which, should not be something that's put on the public. And my clients bought their property, which is at 15 Teesdale, in 1990. At that time, Hinsdale was basically a dirt path. And the issue isn't really that it's become somewhat of an industrial highway. For them, it's that this increasing use in the wee hours, when they're trying to sleep. It's extremely disruptive to them, to others in the neighborhood, and I'm sure people downtown. And I'd like to remind the board that at last month, part of your vote was that this would not happen on the weekends. And in fact, September 25th and October 2nd, which were both Saturdays, they in fact unloaded a barge and drove the trucks back and forth starting sometime around 5:30 in the morning. And this goes on for generally 4 or 5 or 6 hours. They are proposing to do this on October 21st and November 6th. November 6th is also a Saturday. The times of the tide during those days, September 25th, low tide was at 9:26. October 2nd, it was at 3:15 a.m. October 21st, it will be 6:52 a.m. November 6th, it's 7:06 a.m. So that's a huge range. And I really don't understand why they need to be doing something at 5 in the morning. You just can't correlate that if you have one time at 9:30 in the morning and 3:15 in the morning or 3:14 in the morning. How that works out that they have to be there at 5 a.m. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So I just, it just isn't supported by this idea that they have to do it at a certain tide, because those tides are completely different each of the days that they're doing it. I know it's nothing to do with the noise bylaw, but I wanted to bring up the fact that the MCD for their Arrowhead property, which is where they store the materials, limits their hours of operation to 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. So if they get permission to do this under the noise bylaw, they would still be prohibited from doing it under their MCD. So basically it'd be a zoning violation. And so for all of those reasons, but primarily because it interferes with people's quality of life, I would request that the board deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Before I give my thoughts, I'm okay with the, let me see here, October 21st. And for me, I think that's it. I don't want this coming back every month or every 6 weeks. We've given them some time. I think this is a very pro-business board, especially during COVID, trying to get people, businesses to trying to work with them. But this is the second go around. And so I'm fine with October. And then I'm not sure if personally I want it on the agenda ever again. That's kind of where I'm at. So it's for the board. Melissa?
Thanks, Jason. I wasn't here for the last meeting when this was discussed, and I did rewatch the meeting and followed the conversation. And I really don't feel like I can support this request from Toscana. I understand it's quote unquote just 2 more times. But I do think that you were incredibly lenient in giving them the time that they needed over these past 6 weeks. I don't see the need as being justified.
And I think that they need to work these arrangements out directly with the Steamship Authority in terms of access during normal business hours. I'm not going to vote to support this tonight.
Thank you, Melissa. Anybody else for a vote? For a motion is put out there? Don?
I'd make a motion to deny the request.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Don, I'm sorry. There was a little lag. If your hands
Oh.
up, I'll hold my motion.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I actually agreed with Christy that I was not supportive of the weekend date, which I had said before, but I was okay with giving them one more time.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to deny the request, and if there's a second, we can go forward, and if not, it'll die.
Is there a second? Okay, the motion doesn't carry. Is there another motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the October 21st request and then no further accommodations moving forward.
I'll second that. Oh.
Any discussion? I would say outside of some emergency that we cannot think of. Yeah. Any other discussion? Ready for a vote? All those in favor? Melissa Murphy?
No.
Don Holgate?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
Aye.
Mr. Frantella?
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. Passes 4-1. So Erica, did you get all that? We're good. One more, October 21st. And Christy, you, just to clarify, were you on the same page as me that we're not putting this on the agenda again?
Correct.
Okay.
I do have one clarifying. Jason, you had mentioned pending any emergency that you can't think of. Christy, were you open to that as an amendment to your motion? Or I'm sorry, yeah, Christy.
Yeah, I didn't, I guess I was just talking out loud. I wasn't asking for it to be in the amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Post 9 o'clock.
Motion to adjourn.
And
all those in favor, Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Frantella,
aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. Thank you, everyone.